again, everybody, and welcome to another scintillating edition of the Jim Cornette Experience, where today more people in wrestling have gone missing, and a couple of them we weren't missing have turned back up. And we'll have more fun adventures in the silly and wacky world of pro wrestling. And joining me today, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you. He just had 2 wisdom teeth out, and he's still smarter than you are. The great Brian Last. Hello, Gummy.
Aloha, Jim. A pleasure to be here once again. I got 1 painkiller left. This is going to be rough. This is going to be a rough show. I ate several before watching AEW, which was quite the experience, but we'll get to that later in the show.
Well, wait, no. At least tip us off on the way. We've been suspectifying for so long that the people who are constructing that program are on some drugs. Do drugs make you understand the program better?
No. Well, at least not narcotics.
So you won't be able to explain it to me later on when I ask you about. I have so many questions.
I will say this. I mean, AEW is what it is. I don't want to spoil the review now. There were things I thought were okay, all things considered, in the world of AEW. There were things that were completely ridiculous in the standard fare of AEW. But at a certain point in that show, and I can't imagine if you weren't on painkillers, you wouldn't have the same reaction. I just couldn't care any less. Like, the more the show went on, it was like they got all the top guys out of the way the first half of the show, and then it was like, I don't really need to see this Adam Page.
Like one of the old 70s garden shows where they put the main event on before intermission so they could get the top guys out before, the fans let out, so they could avoid the heels couldn't get stabbed and the baby faces couldn't get mobbed. But in this case, they got the top guys out so nobody could take the blame.
Yeah, once you have like the Dark Order and Matt Hardy and Adam Page and Private Party, then you kind of just sit back and let the painkillers kick in, and you close your eyes and you say, "I'll see you tomorrow."
You either got Private or Party. You didn't get both.
Yeah, no. What's going on? Last week we had Isaiah Cassidy, and this week,
we're spoiling it now. We're spoiling it now. Teaser. That's the main event here on the program where we talk about the. And by the way, I want to go on record right now. I will say this at the top of the program to have plenty of time for it to spread. So as we're talking, this can already be going out because I'm sure time is of the essence. Minutes are critical here. I want to be the first one to offer a reward for information leading to the whereabouts and the finding of Shaquille O'Neal. To the recovery of beloved sports icon Shaquille O'Neal. I'm going to chip in $5, and I know other people. Other people are going to feel the same way I do. Wherever he may be, whoever's got him, whatever's happened, come home, Shaq. All is forgiven, and I'm chipping in $5 on the reward fund for information leading to the recovery, to the discovery and the recovery of Shaquille O'Neal, American icon.
Can we talk about this for a moment, please?
Okay.
Since you opened the door.
I opened the forbidden door to logic.
AEW loves their abductions, and they love their kidnappings. And apparently Tony Schiavone was in front of this ambulance, an ambulance so small that Shaq had to bend his knees to get into the ambulance. But he's in front of this ambulance, the door's closed, and then Schiavone just decides he has the authority to open them back up to get an interview, which, is a whole nother problem. Maybe violating some HIPAA laws there. And Shaq is gone. So many people I saw on social media just assumed, there it is, another AEW abduction. I thought, if there's one thing AEW loves more than kidnappings, and more than battle royals, and more than tournaments, and more than qualifying matches, it's teleportation.
Teleportation.
Now, I don't think anyone kidnapped Shaq. However, all the signs are pointing to Shaq having the ability to teleport, apparently to the TNT studios where he was whatever the next night doing basketball commentary. So I'm not sure. I don't think it was a kidnapping.
Instead of straight out of Compton, he was straight out of the ambulance.
That's right. I don't know what Compton had to do with this, but yes.
Well, that was a famous album.
That's right.
From somebody.
But you don't know who did
it was either NWA or
it was
Ice Cube or Ice T.
Well, Ice Cube was in NWA. It was
Ice
NWA.
Coffee.
There was no Ice Coffee.
A variety of beverages.
There was Vanilla Ice. There was Ice Cube. There was Ice Tea. Probably
there was Cold as Ice. You're willing to sacrifice our love. You want paradise. Anyway,
but I don't think Shaq was kidnapped. I just want to say that.
You're on narcotics right now, so you don't know what you'd rather it be teleportation because you got them teeth yanked out of your head. And you didn't have them put you to sleep, to put you under. You allowed yourself to be conscious while someone literally ripped 2 teeths out of your fucking mouth, out of your face, out of your head.
Yeah, I mean, they numb you pretty good, and
fuck that.
You feel a little bit of pressure. And you maybe feel like the stitch against your lip, but
no, that's what they tell you you're going to feel. You'll feel a little bit of pressure. Yeah, when you hear the snap and the crackle and the pop and the blood spurts. No, I want to be in a medically induced coma. That's the only time anybody's pulling any teeth out of my head, and that's what I do every single time. I had my wisdom teeth out, and then I've had 2 other teeth pulled.
It's a lot safer
and I
not
was
to
never
be put
conscious.
Out. It's a lot safer, Michael Jackson, not to be put out for every little thing.
It's a lot safer not to have a fucking toothache for 3 years straight because I'm not going to allow somebody to pull a tooth out of my head while I'm conscious.
You had a toothache for 3 years straight?
No, I'm saying that's what would happen if you couldn't fucking go and get suitably induced into a medical fucking state of bliss and obliviousness before they pull that tooth out of your head.
I didn't feel anything after the first massive shot of Novocaine.
Yeah, I'd like to give you a massive shot of something.
All right.
Well, what
do you got?
And you're such a tough guy. Yeah, you shouldn't need all these pharmaceuticals you're trying to beg for.
Well, no, I'm a pussy once it happens, and I'm over here with this hole in my mouth, and it hurts, and I don't like it. There's nothing worse than tooth pain or dental pain. It's just like throbbing, and it's a pain in the ass. That sounds about right.
Uh-huh.
But once again, I don't think Shaq was kidnapped.
Teleportation. Well, you're on some drugs.
I wanted to teleport watching that. I wanted to teleport to 1985.
just even into the next room. I have a medical update. By the way, finally, we broke this story about Stacy's back problems last year. And then over the holidays, how that the previous doctor that she'd seen just disappeared under cover of darkness over the holiday break and went and opened up his own practice and didn't bother to let anybody know. And then when we tracked him down, his nurse said, well, you can go to the other place and demand your medical records. What the fuck? So anyway, back at the original clinic with another doctor, we just saw him the other day. And by the way, this was a nice, refreshing thing here. I know all these idiot Republican-led states are opening up for everything. No mask mandates, no nothing. Just gather in the town square and slobber and drool all over each other like a bunch of Styles Bitchleys. We go in the medical building, and there's a nice young lady sitting there with the fucking handheld thermometer taking thing, or temperature taking thermometer thing that they pop right up on your forehead. And she's wearing a mask, and they got a nice big sign. Of course, we passed that, and then they got a nice big sign right in front of the elevators. Only 2 people or 1 family in elevator per time, because it's like a 6 by 6 foot square elevator. So we've had our temperature taken, and we punched the button with my gloves on, by the way. Never, never, never handrails and elevator buttons. You just do it without thinking, but that's a source of disaster. Anyway, as soon as the elevator doors open, me and Stace get on, And as the doors are about to close, here comes this old gray-haired lady, and she's just passed the temperature check. So I'm like, okay, so I stop the door, and she's coming in with the cane. And she goes on the other side of the thing, and the door started to close again. And here comes now a pregnant woman and somebody with her. And they stop the door and come on. And now I'm seeing a 6 square foot fucking, well, it'd be more than 6 square feet, wouldn't it? 6 by 6 foot elevator. So I was like, well, goddamn, come on in. And I fucking come out. I said, let's do the Marx Brothers fucking scene. Order some room service. Why don't you? Stacey's out behind me. I'm like, no, you guys just go on. You're obviously in a hurry. Why would you jump into an elevator with people you don't even know? Sign or not. Even if it wasn't posted, it wasn't marked. You get in a 6 foot square elevator with 3 now complete strangers to you. What the fuck is wrong with people? So they go on up. And then I asked the nice young lady who was obviously not armed with a badge or a gun or a fucking nightstick to whack these fucking cretins in the head when they attempt to simulate themselves on other people innocently. And I looked at her, I said, is there stairs? No, there's no stairs. There's no stairs in this fucking building. It's 4 floors. There's no stairs. Certainly that's violating some type of federal fire law. So anyway, the next elevator comes, we go up, and then in the office, there's plenty of space. And they've got everything scrubbed, and it smells like Lysol, so you know they're taking this seriously, and we're away from everybody, and everybody has their own cubicle. Whenever the doctor goes to see you, it's a closed-in cubicle where you don't have to be around anyone else. So that was very refreshing. And the bad news is basically the same thing the first doctor told her is still true. She's got either a cyst and or a bulging disc, which is compressing together on a nerve and needs to have that operated on. But the original doctor was incorrect in that we'd heard 4 to 6 weeks of recovery time with no heavy lifting. But this doctor says more like 3 months. So, and all right, when can we have this done? We'll get you in the first appointment available, which turns out to be, guess what, a month of fucking way. So, and you and I got to talk on April 5th is the magic day, Brian, and we have to reschedule our recording that week for the drive-through. What's going on the night before? That's not WrestleMania weekend, is it? Are you just doing everything all in the same week?
That's what I was thinking. Is that WrestleMania? But I'm not certain.
I don't think it is. I think it's the next weekend is WrestleMania.
By the way, you brought up those thermometers that they kind of aim at your forehead and use.
Yes.
Those things are such bullshit. They never work. I don't know if I mentioned it on the air. I mentioned it to you off the air. When I went to the dentist like 3 weeks ago, it said I was 94.3. I should have been dead. And then the other day when I went for the oral surgery, it said I was 95.8. And I said, these things don't work. And they said, yeah, we know. Then why are we using them?
Well, then, son of a bitch, I must be somewhere near dead with some type of brain meningitis because I had a temperature of normal. So if it's reading you 4 degrees under, I'm somewhere around 103. I got a fever of 103. Come on, baby, do you do more than dance? Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, tomorrow, March 7th, Sunday, because this show comes out on Saturday, March the 6th of 2021.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Correct? Yes. Well, tomorrow, March 7th, it's a momentous day, a momentous occasion. It's Cameo Day, the day where I come out with my first and possibly last cameo greetings, videos for the people, Brian. And we've been talking about this. The account's all set up. It's not live now. Well, it depends on when you're listening to this. But if you're listening to it before Sunday, March 7th at noon Eastern time, then it's not available. But at that point, you can go to Cameo, Cameo, Cameo. You can almost hear the soothing voice of Don Cornelius saying, and it's Cameo. Cameo.com/Jim Cornette, and so many people would like to slash me. And we're going to put 50 of these up, however long they last, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, a lifetime. We're going to put 50 of these up, and then we're going to cut it off. We're going to fulfill those, evaluate the process, see if Hotchkiss gets this all. You know, Hotchkiss Featherbottom is really counting on this because the money that he makes off of these is going to put him through reform school. And see if it's a pain in my ass as well, and then we'll evaluate. If everybody's happy, we might do it again. But anything, I will say anything, as I've mentioned before, I'll say anything that's not illegal. You get on the site from the folks at Cameo, you get 250 characters to give me a scoop, something to say, if it's for you, if it's for somebody else, if it's happy birthday, if it's go fuck off, whatever it may be. You get those characters to give me something to work with. I've mentioned no essay questions. No, tell me the history of wrestling, Jim. But give me enough for a couple minutes of content. I can, if forced, ad lib if necessary, just, a bit. But anyway, I've had a couple people now tweet or whatever say, well, what happens if somebody wants you to say something that you wouldn't want to say, like, oh, I just love Twinkle Toes' wrestling. He's an artist. I mean, just if anybody wants to spend some money to try to fuck with me, to see what you get. See what you get. That's all I've got to say. I may even say some things, but they might not be in the tone of voice that you might be intending, but just try to fuck with me. And I get the last word and your money and see what happens. Anyway, so that's going to happen. Cameo.com/Jim Cornette at noon Eastern on Sunday, March 7th. This is an historic, possibly once in a lifetime occurrence. I don't know how this goes. I may throw Hotchkiss off the deck in the process of trying to do all. It'll be like back at Crockett's office on Wednesdays doing promos one after the other. By the time we got to fucking Salisbury, Maryland, some people were losing their fucking religion with doing promos those days. So who knows? If you get number 1, I'll be fresh. If you get number 50, I may be a little cranky. We'll see which ones they like best.
Hey, are we going to be putting any of these on YouTube?
Well, that's an interesting thought. I don't know. Are we invading someone's privacy here? I guess nobody's going to ask me to give them personal tax advice or talk about their medical records. Some of these actually go up as samples on the Cameo website. So we may have to do something like that. If some of them are pithy and if they tickle us, basically, if they tickle us by the taint, we may have to put some of them up on the YouTube channel so people can see what they're getting into, I guess.
Yeah, we can't have someone else taking it and putting it on their YouTube channel, you saying hello to All Elite Scooby-Doo or something.
Yeah, we can't have a bunch of jackoffs critiquing my cameos, can we? Well, that would just be rude and terrible. And also, I should mention that for those who have been, and I've actually had a bunch of emails about this. I'm not kidding. Apparently there's some people in the at least the Midwestern United States that are unclothed because they can't wait to buy more Jim Cornette t-shirts. But the Cornette's Collectible Store at JimCornette.com will reopen Sunday, March 14th. And all your favorites will be on sale. We've trimmed the inventory down a bit, but action figures, both originals and Christmas variants, will be back in stock, and I will add a small in non-capital letters, we hope. Because, yeah, Brian, I haven't heard this on the news. Have they moved China?
No.
The boat from China, and I wish I was, if I'm lying, I'm flying and my feet ain't left the ground. I wish I was making this up. This is not a bit. The boat from China that was supposed to be docking in the contiguous 48 states, namely Florida, last week, I have still not gotten the word, either that or there's the customs thing, but we're awaiting word that these figures are actually in the United States, and we are still, according to Figures Toy Company, we should still be good, but we are crossing our fingers now that I will be taking the orders. They're somewhere probably by this point out of international waters and circumnavigating Cape Canaveral down there or something. Anyway, so the store opens Sunday, March 14th. Maybe it's just the currents these days. You know, with climate change, they've got the currents all cattywampus. They're fighting again. Maybe they don't the new requiremements. They don't have as much horsepower on the Chinese boats as they used to.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I don't think that's the problem. No.
Well, thank you, fucking Captain Crunch. You fucking maritime genius. You navigational
Captain Crunch
ship expert.
That's one of my favorite interviews. I love smarmy Jacques Rougeau. And when the Quebecers were feuding with, I think, the Head Shrinkers, and the Head Shrinkers had Alpha and Captain Lou. It's kind of like how Yokozuna had you at Fuji. They had Alpha and Captain Lou, but it's like slimmed down, babyface, not drinking Captain Lou. Not as much fun. And Jacques Rougeau on Monday Night Raw said, whatever he said, like, what do you have to say, Captain Crunch? And just him saying that to him cracked me up. I could watch Jacques Rougeau talk all day.
Well, imagine if you could even listen to him. That would be even better. Also, if you like smarmy Jacques Rougeau, then you would have been a good personal friend of Jacques Rougeau. That's pretty much the only one you ever got. But speaking of smarmy, we get to talk down to the kids here on this segment, Brian. The young people out there. I've got an email, Brian, from one of the people. In this case, the people is named James. And we get to talk down to the young folks, and I don't mean it, James. It's all in good fun. But let me read you this email, and you'll get a kick out of it. He said, actually, this is to both me and you. He says, I wonder if Jim has noticed this. I can't believe this is a real thing, but a fan on Twitter told me that depending on if you're a heel or a babyface, you come out of a certain tube. From the camera's view, the left tube is the heel tube and the right tube is the face tube. So when Sammy Guevara hesitated before leaving the stage after quitting the Inner Circle was because he usually uses the heel tube, but he turned face right there by going through the face tube instead. My question to Jim is, has any other promotion had specific entranceways for heels and faces that only smart fans would notice?
And by the way, Cody comes right down the middle because he's a singular man.
Well, he comes right down the middle because his entrance looks better that way, and Moxley comes out of the fucking parking lot because that's what he did the last time he was on a show people watched. But besides that, Brian, it's been so long that now they think that separate baby faces and heels entrances is a secret thing for the smart fans only that is like an Easter egg, as they call them, that they have to discover and note. There are people out there who don't realize that for anywhere in any building or arena that it was practical, that it was possible to do so. For the first 100 years of professional wrestling, the heels and baby faces entered from a different location. There are people now that don't know this and think that because the booking marks, mines behind AEW have fixed the tubes as an homage to the old days. But the thing is that nobody understands who the fuck is coming out of them. And so there is a heel and babyface tube kind of in AEW, but they think that's new and revolutionary.
Yeah, plus, by the way, there's a difference between coming out of a heel or babyface dressing room door and coming out of two tubes that are both connected to the same backstage area.
Yeah, yes, that they show regularly. Yeah. Just to bring everybody up to speed on this, yes, in all wrestling promotions, on the live events, even where practical in a TV studio, in Memphis, the baby faces entered from the sliding doors that connected the studio to the back storage and tape area in WMC TV Channel 5, and the heels entered from the door that connected to the bathrooms and business offices. So the people could see them coming out of different doors in two different parts of the building. In arenas, they would go so far as to come from different ends of the arena, completely opposite ends of these big buildings. It wasn't, but even in spot shows, I was going to say it wasn't like rec centers where, you had a curtain over one door but even in the smallest National Guard armories or high school gyms, if there were two doors, even if you had to come from the same locker room, the same small room that you were crammed in, and walk all the way around a building in a hallway that people couldn't see to get to another door, that's the way it worked. Heels and baby faces always came from a different place because the logic obviously was if these mortal enemies of each other are sharing a locker room, then it's either fake or they should be beating the shit out of each other but as soon as they see each other and not wait for the match. And I mean, it was, as we've mentioned, we've told this story before, Bill Watts carried it to such a degree that when Jim Neidhart and Butch Reed had been a tag team, but they split up and Neidhart became a babyface for the last 4 weeks he was in the territory or whatever, to feud with Butch and do a job for him on the way out. They had broken up in Shreveport on television, but the TV tape that they broke up on took 3 or 4 weeks to cycle its way around the entire territory, 16 or 17 markets, everywhere from Houston to Oak City to Little Rock to Tulsa to New Orleans, etc. So during that period of time, since it had already happened, it just hadn't been shown on television, Neidhart couldn't dress with the baby faces or the heels. Watts didn't want him in the same locker room as Butch Reed because they had technically broken up in front of fans 300 miles away. But he certainly didn't want Neidhart in the locker room with the baby faces because he was still a heel on that show, just not teaming with Butch Reed. So poor Neidhart had to dress in whatever janitor's office, broom closet. He actually came out of a goddamn mop closet in the Sam Houston Coliseum one night in front of the fans. And with a mop bucket fucking right behind him as he closed the door. I watched him do it because that was more real. And yes, if the same thing at the Louisville Gardens when I was a kid. You would see clearly the baby faces came out of the left side of the rear entrance ways, and the heels came out of the right. Now, of course, as soon as you went back there, the stairs went downstairs where the locker rooms were all connected, but only people that had actually worked in Louisville Gardens or been security for or whatever, which is a small percentage of the town at that point in time, had ever been down there. So they didn't know. So, they're good guys' locker room and the bad guys' locker room. And that's the way it was. And then when wrestling got a budget, when, Vince wanted to be Walt Disney and TBS took over. And I always thought it was so ironic that the exact time that we started getting these giant stages that the fans couldn't climb and these big wide 20-foot wide entrance ways down the middle of ringside where nobody can reach you or even touch you, coincided with the exact moment where all the heels lost all their real heat and nobody gave a fuck to want to try to take a swing at you. In all the years that we were fucking going through these goddamn crowded fucking arenas that with 3-foot wide aisleways, going to the ring in these dark buildings with 2 fucking off-duty cops sometimes. Police coverage ranged from excellent to practically non-existent, depending on the town. And you have to fight your way sometimes there and most times back. And we couldn't get any help. But then as soon as TV takes over and they've got a budget and everything's phony and nobody gives a shit about trying to attack anybody, fuck, the president gets closer to the fucking public than the wrestlers do on their entrances now. But no, that's what started everybody coming out from the same place was the television entrance stage and ramp. And then So there were no more territories. So the promoters that got in the business to replace them started building their buildings as they were seeing on television. And like I've said with AEW and so many other programs, you can't tell who the babyface and heels are to begin with. And sometimes they actively try to make sure you can't, which is insane. So there's no reason to even try it now. But yes, there is apparently an homage on AEW to a babyface and a heel tube that goes backstage and connects to the same place, just like the gorilla position in the WWE that they've established. They even have the long walks with the guys. They started doing it with Goldberg and WCW and whatever the fuck, where they will show you walk right past and through the curtain way, and everybody would have to be congregated in that same area. So once they've shown you that, it makes it look especially stupid when these guys here. Besides, I've said no DQ is lazy booking, but here's another thing: lazy booking. Fight off. You know what I'm talking about, Brian. That's what they'll give you the I've actually heard finish meetings in recent years where they will actually just tell the guys, and they automatically know because it's done so much, and you guys get together and just fight off. You know what that means, right?
No, what does it mean?
Get in a fight and leave the whole goddamn building. Never be seen again. Fight off. Just fight off. Which, the Bill Watts in me, every time I hear that, wants to scream the invisible wall, because that's the first thing I learned when I got to Mid-South Wrestling. You would get fined if somebody hit the ring to make a save and the heels bailing out hit the floor and then stopped, and the baby faces didn't go out after them. Watts would call the invisible wall rule, where he'd say, "You fucking idiots, what an invisible wall just come up out of the ground and prevent you from going after them? Why were you so mad going into the ring? They jump out, they're 10 feet away. You don't go after them? What the fuck's the matter with you?" Because he was right. And it made everybody look stupid. So when you were bailing, you bailed and you got the fuck out of there. You didn't stand around and bury the baby faces. If you got away quick enough, the baby faces could stay there and check on their fallen comrade instead of rushing after you because you were fucking gone. And it's the same thing here. And it just fight off. How many times do you see in these matches, you've got 6 or 8 people, and all of a sudden, 3/4 of the match gets in a fight on the floor, and they fight up to the stage or down the tube or wherever, and they just fight off, and you never see them again. And then whoever does the finish does the finish. And there's no... That didn't used to happen for one particularly logistical reason. If you would never do it at a spot show or in a small building in front of, 1,000 people or whatever. If you were in a big building and doing an angle like that, the guys would have had to got together and fought down a 80 or 100-foot aisleway and out of a major arena, and it would have distracted so much from what the fuck was going on in the ring. And then where would those people have gone? Why doesn't one side should come back? Are we expected to believe they do this in Seg 6 and we never see those people again? Are they still fighting in the parking lot somewhere? Shouldn't we have an update? If they're not still fighting, then why didn't somebody come back? Usually the winner comes back, doesn't they, Brian? But in this case, nobody ever comes back. Invisible wall.
Hey, you mentioned earlier the stage and the ramp, and that's something that's been everywhere since the mid-90s. Raw, Nitro, then eventually even ECW, Ring of Honor. We see it now with AEW. Impact has had it for years. What are your thoughts on that? On the idea of a stage that wrestlers come out to, and in WWE, they all have their individual pose that they do, which is ridiculous. And then they come down the ramp. Do you have a preference? Do you like the stage, or do you think the stage is counterproductive? What are your thoughts?
Well, it is a television production. And pay-per-view used to even have a bigger, as you'll remember, had a bigger set than television because there was more money in pay-per-view back in those days. I don't mind some element of television presentation. And especially, when the WWE started making the big stages, the really big stages, is when they started selling fewer tickets and they had more room in the building. Remember, during the Attitude Era, things were, it looked good, but it was still not as big as these goddamn football fields now. And I'm not talking about now during the COVID era, where they've got all the room in the world. But sometimes they go so crazy with the themes, the Halloween shows with the bales of hay and the ghosts and the spooks, or just the ridiculous over-themed stagey sets that looks more like one of these game shows where, average marks run through an obstacle course full of foam rubber things that knocks them into mud. The UFC manages to have big major pay-per-views and big events and still make it a major television spectacle and still have the goddamn fighter's entrance through an arena, right? So I don't mind the big background sets if they're not too hokey. I think the stage takes up a lot of room. I'd rather be selling those tickets. I obviously don't mind poses and shit because that's been a staple of wrestling since Buddy Rogers got in the ring and fucking, did his thing with his cape, or Gorgeous George with the robe, or whatever the fuck. But when everybody has their goddamn cue and their spot they have to hit for their pose so the pyro can go off in the perfect place behind them in the exact same order every time, and it takes any kind of spontaneity out of it and any kind of energy of this guy is just a fired up fucker coming down there. Entrances used to be more for the heels really than the baby faces. And then the rock and roll tag teams, the Fabs and the rock and roll and everything started changing that. But entrances used to be for the heel to come out and get some fucking heat from the people by just being himself and walking to the ring and being him. And then the babyface could come out and just be an all-American guy. But yes, I know for the television era, they have to be juiced up. But at the same time, they've wrung a lot of just the legitimacy and the connection with the people, because you're doing the same thing every time in every building in front of every crowd. And that was never the case when you just went out and did your entrance based on and even in the days of music, guys still weren't doing the same entrance. They're playing the same music, but they're coming out and they're playing off of what they've got in that environment. And it's just more choreographed, predetermined, pre-patterned cookie cutter type of thing instead of letting guys be more real.
See, I love it. I love the visual of a wrestler coming out with building security guards around them through a slim aisleway. It just looks more energetic, looks more exciting. But the other thing is with the staging and
it's a whole lot more energetic when you're on that slim aisle with those security guards coming through that fucking crowd. It's very energetic.
No one today has to worry about anything when it comes to heat, so it would work. But the other thing is when it comes to the staging and what you said, it's all television production. One of the worst things about wrestling the last several years, and the pandemic has kind of boosted this a lot, but even when it was, when it was Raw on the road every week, going to a different location, every building looks the same. Every building is set up the same. Nothing seems different or special. If you watched a Raw and then didn't watch again for 6 months and watched it, it would look just like the show that you saw 6 months ago. And I think that sucks. I always like the buildings all having their own look. The Garden had its own look. The Mid-South Coliseum had its own look. Every building had its own look. Now every building is set up to look exactly the same on TV.
In those days, you could go to different towns in the same territory with the same guys. It would almost be like being in a different wrestling territory because all the buildings were different. Most of the ring announcers were different. The fans were different. It was a whole different experience. And now, like you said, every company that has any kind of a budget to try to imitate everybody else looks the same. And also, there's something to be said when you've got, once again, I know there's no fans for the last year, but in the previous 20 years, when you've had fans in the building, but you barely see them. You see mostly the entrance or the wide aisle way or the aisle wide way. I want to just know that there is a sea of people around the ring, but when the match starts, I like it when the lights go down and the focus is on the ring and you hear the people reacting. It's more UFC-like, it's more boxing-like, it's more fight-like than I'm not talking about the atrocious Thunderdome with those colorful cutouts that give you a fucking aneurysm to watch, but just they've lit the crowd to the point where between the lit up entranceway and stage and the lit up crowd and the light, it's brighter outside the ring than it is inside the ring. It's like going to the movies and when the show starts, they turn the lights up. Anyway, so I'm understand it's a television production and things evolve, but bells and whistles don't have to be tied to everything but the actual product that you're televising. That's my belief. But anyway, different fucking entranceways for the heels and the baby faces. Who could have thought that would ever be a thing, Brian? Imagine that. You know, if all the guys had been in the same locker room, imagine all the fights and the injuries and the people getting hurt and kidnapped. What they would have needed every night if they only had one locker room for all these guys, the enemies, to dress in the same room with each other, they would have needed a crate of Omax every night just to be able to get through that.
Who doesn't? I could use a crate of Omax right now.
Here in a minute, ladies and gentlemen, Brian, you're going to hear the sound of Brian Last sucking on some Omax Cryo Freeze roll-on to try to alleviate and ameliorate his tooth pain. But folks, if you've got aches and pains from arthritis, backaches, muscle soreness, joint pain, and you want to try a drug-free solution, unlike my merry prankster co-host here, you owe it to yourself to try the product that you're probably hearing about on every news outlet. It's the Omax Cryo Freeze. We've been talking about them for a year or two now. Whether it's your back, your neck, your hands, any painful area besides your teeth, gums, and also your sphincter, don't do that. It will reduce inflammation, improve muscle and joint flexibility. The super cold menthol and the hemp CBD, it provides relief quick, and it lasts up to 8 hours longer than any other roll-on, and this stuff is great. Every product that Omax has is great. The one-a-day supplements, the sport cream, but the Cryo Freeze is the grandpappy. And right now, Omax is offering my listeners 20% off on a 1-month supply of Omax Cryo Freeze, and that 20% discount applies to any product site-wide. Go to Omax, O-M-A-X, health.com right now and enter the code JCE, omaxhealth.com. Enter the code JCE. You'll get 20% off the Omax Cryo Freeze or site-wide, anything they got. No messy creams, horrible fragrances. This stuff works. Just roll it over where it hurts and ice out the pain. omaxhealth.com, the code JCE, 20% off. I don't know how we continue to bring these incredible deals, Brian, to the unsuspecting public. And speaking of the unsuspecting public, bro, we have a rule here. We don't make things up here on the program. We talk about things that are actually taking place. We don't make things up, and this next news story is one of the reasons why we don't have to make things. How would you be able to make things like this up? For the people who don't know, apparently a wrestling event was advertised this past week for my old hometown, Knoxville, Tennessee. And the poster got out on social media for the event. It was titled Wrestling for the number 4, right? Wrestling for Women's Charity, which is like wrestling for cola. What just women's charity? We're going to find some women walking down the street and give them this money. I've done that before, and everybody usually enjoys it. But anyway, wrestling for women's charity, and there was a bunch of guys' faces on the poster, but you saw the poster, right, Brian, on the social media?
Oh, yeah.
It was one of those, oh, yeah, oh, no. It was one of those sepia tone type of things where everybody was in like the same tone and all the faces and heads and shoulders were gathered together. And right down at the teeny tiny bottom and teeny tiny little headshot, as everybody was paying attention, the names weren't all mentioned, but as everybody was paying attention, the little teeny tiny headshot was of little teeny tiny Joey Ryan. Joey Ryan pops up again on a wrestling show in Knoxville, Tennessee, wrestling for women's charity. How ironic, Alanis Morissette might say. It's like rain on your wedding day or possibly your trial date. But anyway, needless to say, consternation ensued. And there were a couple of AEW talents, in quotation marks, I use that. I don't know who they were, so... But the Tony
Brian Cage and Sonny Kiss, I think, were on the show.
Well, there was at least one quotation mark. And Tony Khan tweeted, "Wow, is this true? I'm pulling my talent if he has anything to do with this." And then he retweeted after he tweeted again. Wait a minute. Does this mean the charity might not be legitimate? The wrestling for women's charity. Why question that? Well, that's as plain as the nose on your face. So apparently, with all of this investigation going on and sunlight being the best disinfectant, we find out the fucking email account for the promoters or the people behind this event was Joey Ryan's Bar Wrestling. And somehow he was behind this. Stop me if I'm telling a lie. Is this what's been reported? Somehow he was behind this wrestling for women's charity show taking place or being instigated, not taking place. It ain't got that far yet and probably ain't going to get that far now. The whole thing was somebody put out on Twitter that alleged they were running the show, but they weren't identified and said, well, we're just going to cancel it now. What do we know about this, Brian?
First of all, I have to say, it appears that he was behind the show, Bar Wrestling. Considering he was the dick guy, what a pair of balls on this guy to put himself in the poster. Why even do that? That's begging for the controversy when we'll talk about some of the conspiracy theories about why all this happened. The other thing is, apparently it really is a woman's charity that was involved with the show. It is one that is like a super Christian charity going into his whole religious gimmick now. But this is just baffling.
Did they know that the person trying to do a charity show for them was the person that's been hounded out of wrestling for accusations of sexual impropriety, but while he was in wrestling, was famously known for forcing people to grab his dick and balls to get paid?
I don't know. Obviously, none of his court cases have that in the paperwork, that I was the dick wrestler, and I had people grabbing my dick and doing this. It is, there's something unique about wrestling. We've talked about how in the past there were all these guys who, of course they were in wrestling. They were these outlaws. They were these wild men, these crazy people that didn't fit into society. So they became wrestlers. And then a lot of these guys today are like, wrestling isn't like that. We don't have the carnies of old. Wrestling's for everybody. It's all inclusive. And then you find out, no, it's the same thing. These guys have nowhere else to go, nothing else to do, and they just wait and try to worm their way back in. You can get busted for anything, and you will try to worm your way back in. And wrestlers love money, so a lot of wrestlers will just go along with it. He has friends still. There are people who will work with him because they're still friends with him, despite every story that came out about this guy. It's ridiculous. Of course he's going to try to do this. He's going to keep trying to do stuff. What else is he going to do? He's 5'6". He has no discernible skills or talents beyond being the dick guy. His wrestling career wasn't really doing that great before he became the dick guy. He was involved with Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and then he wasn't. Like, there's nothing else. This guy's whole life is about being Joey Ryan. the rock star wrestling performer. What else is he going to do? Is he going to become an accountant? Is he going to become an attorney? Is he going to go run a business? No. He's going to try to worm his way back into wrestling, and it may work with some people, but I think you're seeing now, as soon as anyone got the whiff of him, and what a whiff it is, they jumped, and that show went away really quick. And I brought this up before, I'll bring it up now. There are people who believe this was done intentionally, so that now he could show in his trials, look, I can't even work in my trade. As soon as I did this show for women's charity, and I put myself on the poster, I was canceled because of all these stories. There are people who think, I don't know if you call it a conspiracy or not, that this was an intentional effort on behalf of Joey Ryan to show that he's a pariah.
Or a piranha.
Or a piranha.
I disagree with you about something you said earlier, though. When you said it's the same. No, it's not the same as it used to be when Joey Ryan and others of his ilk. Where's that David Starr? Old Max Barsky. Sounds like a fucking De Niro character. And they're all hairy. They won't get rid of their body hair. I wish Manscaped was a sponsor today. I'll give them a free plug. Somebody should have held those two monkeys down and shaved both of them, Barsky and fucking Meehan. But two fucking brown and serve rolls rolled in pubic hair. But anyway, they wanted everybody to modify their behavior. And they said, oh, people of my generation, me, Jim Cornette, people of my generation, specifically me, Jim Cornette in person, we're cancers to wrestling. It's not like it was in the old days. We're all inclusive and wrestling is fun now and for everyone, and everyone can be involved. The only people that can't be involved is the fucking fans, because there ain't any. Because my horrible generation was not out harassing every female wrestling trainee and every merchandise girl and every hot dog vendor in the building, browbeating them and harassing them and begging them and pleading with them and following them around to the point of goddamn ridiculousness. My generation didn't have to fucking go out in the goddamn concession stand and play sticky finger with the fucking t-shirt girl at 16 years old or whatever, because there were millions of adult female fans in the buildings that were coming there for the specific purpose of hooking up with people. And everybody was having a fine time. But now that these play wrestlers and fucking wrestling's for fun and everybody can be involved, now that they've run off all the fans and they're such obvious pussies that women aren't interested in them and don't buy tickets to see the matches, so they have a sausage fest at every event, and they desperately want to live like rock stars because they've heard that's what wrestlers are supposed to be. Guess what? That was years ago, pal. It don't happen that way anymore, so now that's what they have to do. Whether it's the guys in England that are encouraging teenage girls, 14, 15, 16, oh, come train to be wrestlers with us. It'll be fun. That level of unprofessionalism I've never gotten over as a person who's had a hand at a high-level training facility. Or, hey, let's just assault or browbeat or wear down any female within any radius of us to prove that we're rock stars. That's the Meehans and the fucking Barskys of the world that were trying to tell everybody how rotten it used to be and how rotten we all were. And every time they try to accuse us of being rotten, they got nothing. And every time they get accused of being rotten, there's about 18 or 20 people listing places, dates, names, and fucking activities. So who's the rotten people around here?
The fact that that show was in Knoxville, of all places, and again, he put himself on the poster. That's the interesting move. Like, why would you do that? You know this is going to happen. You know everyone's going to go, oh no, you will not be coming to this town. You will not be wrestling on this show. And we're going to make a big stink about it until this show goes away.
You know, your story, I believe that. Actually, it's a great fucking Hail Mary of a legal defense.
Yeah.
See, but here's the thing.
Yeah, even Tony Khan, he could use that now. Look, even this promoter of the show on national television came out and said no one's allowed to work on a show with me.
But could that not indeed backfire when you can prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt that everyone in your profession despises you and the idea of you to the point where they will immediately flee any event that you're associated with? Is that a good thing to prove in court?
It's amazing how many people turn the other way, look the other way at Joey Ryan for so long. I don't want this to become a slam Dave, and that's not what this is. Just bringing up the point. When Dave was on the show, Dave Meltzer, a long time ago, when you guys were still talking,
gets over with that audience. I said, Dave,
that was his excuse.
Just come out and just say that this is bullshit. This one thing, regardless of your other favorites, regardless of whatever else, just say the one thing. The guy throwing people around with his dick is horseshit. Just say that for the record. He wouldn't do it.
And the Joey Ryan defense for wrestling is, it works. People like it, so do it. And I think you can apply that to a lot of other garbage that's out there that should be reevaluated. But there were stories about this guy. People were whispering. People were saying things. We heard some stuff. So the idea that all these guys that were close with him, the Young Bucks, they had him on their all-in show with penis druids coming out. There are women who say that this guy sexually assaulted them, and there he is on a platform with penis druids.
That, by the way, will be the only time in the United States of America, or even North America as a continent today, that people say the phrase penis druids.
Again, I don't buy that none of those Southern California guys knew about Joey Ryan's reputation.
Well, of course not.
I don't buy it for a second, because we heard stuff. How could they not have heard stuff if they're with him all the time, around him all the time? Apparently there were women. I read somewhere where women in the locker room.
His ex-roommates had quite a few things to say, but I won't go off on that tangent.
But I read like women in the locker room were like sticking together, like let's not like leave anyone alone when he's around. What? I never saw that in the locker room when I was around. We all got to hide in a corner from this fucking guy. But again, what else is he going to do? This is it. I mean, this is all, you said Hail Mary. This is all a Hail Mary. These lawsuits for millions and millions of dollars. He ain't going to get it from any of these people that don't have it. Who knows what happens with Impact, because there's a real company behind them. But what else is he going to do with the rest of his life? His whole life was dedicated to being a wrestler. He wasn't good at that. He wound up with this gimmick that went viral, got a porn sponsorship. What was it, like Pornhub or some porn site sponsored his dick? That move.
Do you think he had to have their logo tattooed on the side of it? Thank God it wasn't Goodyear.
The funny thing now is he probably couldn't even get work as a porn star.
Well, I think he was more of a stunt double or a fluffer than an actual star in the thing, wasn't he?
Well, you know what I'm saying. He
just did cameos of that. Well, not really the kind of cameos I'm going to be doing.
But what a pathetic guy. Just move on with your life. Go figure out something else, because it won't be in wrestling. And look, the problem is you look at other examples of people who got caught doing really awful shit. People got caught on camera doing awful shit. They never go away. They always try to worm their way back in. And to an extent, it works. Because wrestlers will be happy to stick their hand out and take some money. And wrestlers will sometimes defend the things that you can't defend. But he's going to keep trying to worm his way back into wrestling. He has nothing else.
I like the way you refer to it as worm his way back.
That's what it is.
The whole dick joke thing. There's just another tie-in there. Well, should we go from young Joey to young Rock? God, that's a horrible transition, but we'll stick with it because at least it's more uplifting. Here's a guy who actually worked from a humble upbringing to become the biggest movie star in Hollywood, and now in 2032 he's going to be running for president. And a really crummy newscaster is going to cover his presidential candidacy.
Man, someone got on me on Twitter saying that they love, forgive me for not remembering his name. He's like, I love everything Brian says. I always agree with him, except this. How dare you say anything bad about whoever this actor is who...
Randall Park.
He's done various other things. I think I saw him in Veep. when I used to watch that. But him, and specifically what is written for him, sucks in this show. But there's a lot of sucking in this week's episode we could talk about.
Well, and let me just say this. For the documentarian in you, I understand why you hated this episode. But the newscaster's wearing on me because it's I see through it. I don't think he's funny. I think he's being funny on purpose, and he's not being funny as a result of it. I don't know. The Rock is always golden whenever he's out there. He just exudes charisma. But boy, they were really at the start of this episode, they were trying to put Vince over, even though this episode was in Hawaii in 1982. Depending on what part of 1982, Vince had or was about to buy Titan Sport, the parent company, from his father. And there are just so many inaccuracies. I love Rick James at the start of the program. Let's start with the positive stuff. But the whole time frame, everybody involved in this episode, what was going on, it didn't work because I know once again they're going for a casual audience and people who don't even watch wrestling, but none of this ever would have or could have taken place or would have taken place with any of these people involved, or they would not have done the things that they did had it indeed taken place. Did that about cover it?
This episode infuriated me. First of all, you brought up Vince. Of all the actors you can get to play Vince McMahon, this guy that they found exudes none of Vince McMahon.
None of Vince.
There have been inaccuracies in every episode, and we kind of have said, look, if it was a documentary, we would kill it for these things, but it's a fun little silly show. But this week's episode, everything was so egregious that I was infuriated watching it. I was like, how did Rock sign off on this crap this week?
Well,
and there will be some kid one day who's like, gets in the wrestling business and thinks he knows wrestling history, and we'll talk about when the Junkyard Dog jumped to the Hawaiian Cowboys promotion or whatever the fuck.
Let's start more positive things. Rocky, the actor Rocky Johnson, is full of himself, is he not? Boy, he's got that down pat. I've mentioned last week I like Otta, I think the best on the show, but the Leah Maivia actress looks pretty fucking good, looks close, right? And she's like a comedy version of Leah Maivia without the death threats. Sort of like Dennis Corleuzzo was the fun version of Tony Soprano without the organized crime and mob hits.
Hey, if you want the death threats, introduce a Lars Anderson character onto the show.
I was about to say, well, that's maybe who's coming after the opposition promoter will be the Lars Anderson guy. But okay, the JYD actor is a fat slob in 1982 when Dog was Jack. Dog was never in Hawaii in 1982. He wasn't working for Vince yet. Either Vince. He was still in Mid-South.
The Dog was never that fat as an active wrestler.
Never that fat ever. Yeah. Randy Savage is introduced and did Dusty's line. Vince McMahon Sr. nor Jr. never co-promoted a battle royal with Leah Maivia in 1982. There may have been WWF talent there, but not this selection of it. None of these guys were together in Hawaii in 1982, especially Randy Savage, who was still living in Lexington in a fucking apartment off of New Circle Road, running his own fucking business with his father and Lanny.
82 is the year Peter Maivia died, isn't it?
I thought so. So now they're thinking about him like he's been gone for fucking 10 years. He may not be fucking cold in the ground yet. Rocky Johnson is jealous over Andre's action figure, but Andre wasn't the first person to get an action figure, and the action figures didn't come out until, was it 85 or 86?
Oh, it was definitely 85. I was going to say late 84, but definitely by 85. The first batch were Hogan, Andre, Iron Sheik, and then I think it was Big John Studd and Nikolai, and then they introduced the rest of the first set, which was like JYD, Piper, etc.
Because the first time that me and the Midnight Express started thinking, wait a minute, maybe we should ask more about them dolls he was talking about during our meeting with Vince, where we were like, what the fuck? Why would anybody want to buy dolls of us? We're heels, right? We found out Iron Sheik got a quarterly check for like 60-something grand. Quarter check for the dolls. But anyway, it didn't happen in 1982, and it wasn't Andre, and blah blah blah. Did Otta ever audition for Star Search?
That was news to me. Again, I'm not going to criticize. That's the best character on the show.
Yeah, I'm actually wanting to see where that goes.
Yeah,
I had not heard this.
I don't know anything about that.
And when the JYD guy said the opposition promoter offered him more money, plus I get to do whatever I want with my persona. Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't his best friend, but I spent a lot of time around Junkyard Dog, hearing him talk in the locker room, whatever the fuck. Those are words that would have never come out of his mouth, especially in 1982. And he was wanting to drop the JYD gimmick and be a fucking rich gimmick or whatever the fuck. It made him sound like an idiot. No wrestler would have talked like that in 1982.
Yeah, what did he say?
They do today.
Was it Penthouse Dog? Was that what he wanted?
Penthouse Dog instead of Junkyard Dog. I can be rich and blah blah. Just no. And besides that, the Outlaw promoter. Okay, who was it? You're a better historian off the top of your head than I am. Who was it that did try to run opposition to Lee Maivia? I've been trying to think.
I don't remember the name, but I remember it being years later in the 80s, because that was where there was a big controversy, where there were death threats, and
yes,
Leah and Lara's got in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
But I guarantee you it wasn't this little Chinese cowboy that they showed. and none of the guys would have been showing an already booked match to go work for this guy. And this story is no.
There was never that level of talent in Hawaii for periods of time in the 80s. Just hanging around.
They would come in for the big, it wasn't like they were living in a hotel waiting for these matches. They would come in for the shot and they'd go. There was tons of talent that would come in and out, and maybe they'd take a vacation singly. But not just everybody just hanging out.
You'd come back from Japan, you'd stop in Hawaii.
But anyway, we need to work your 605 sources, because we need to find out and tell the real story behind the opposition story in Hawaii and the death threats and the people being suggested to leave the island, either on their own power or feet first and things like that.
How about when they had the poster where they talk about each guy and they start moving? Not only did they have the most bootleg-looking King Kong Bundy ever, they didn't even have the right kind of singlet. It looked completely off.
Well, he was King Kong Bundy from the hips down, but he was Baron von Raschke from the waist up. That fucking... It just... And I know who you're going to find that actually looks like these people. If you had anybody that looks like these people, they'd already be in wrestling. But it just, I don't know. Those were my thoughts. Is it just, and there wasn't much of Young Rock in this Young Rock, was there? Except him hawking his dad's gimmicks, which, by the way, Rocky Johnson wasn't selling his own merchandise in 1982.
Yeah, the idea that Rocky Johnson was upset about Andre getting a figure in 82. Rocky wasn't even working for the WWF in 82. But also, he was never the number 2 star. I mean, he was over really big when he worked with Morocco before the Snuka-Morocco feud, but he was never, like, right below Andre.
No.
Never, ever. And I don't know,
also, I guess Bob Backlund doesn't exist at this point.
Yeah. Or Jimmy Snuka.
Or Jimmy Snuka. Oh, could there be an interfamilial island feud there? Because Snuka was legitimately, in 1982, the number 1 babyface, because even though Backlund was the champion, Snuka was more popular.
Yeah, I mean, this show is just, it's all over the place. Just Randy Savage randomly being there. And this cowboy. And the other thing is in
1982, Randy Savage didn't have the money to buy a plane ticket to Hawaii.
And they gave the Young Rock, he's like, I'll start a fan club for you. They gave him Barry Rose's gimmick.
Yeah.
Because there was a Rocky Johnson fan club, the Thrill Seekers fan club in the mid-70s.
And where I stole the Thrill Seekers name for Storm and Jericho. I researched it, for 15 years later. Yeah, Barry Rose should actually be... Maybe he can force NBC to give him a executive producer credit for not suing for misrepresentation of him. Boy, see here, if only Stephen P. New was advertising today, we could go right into that. But there's so many of these transitions that we just can't use today.
What do you think of the show overall? It's just, and it bounces around. Like last week it was Rock in high school. Now it's back to him as a little kid. I mean, I like the general idea, but just the execution leaves a lot to be desired.
I'm thinking it might be easier to follow if it was a little more chronological, but this is supposed to be just snippets from his childhood. I get that. I don't know. It's hard when you're not a sitcom. If you're a sitcom, you either have a laugh track or you do it in front of a live audience, but there's some feedback. Well, there's funny lines here, but it's not really a sitcom, so nobody's laughing, and it kind of, But then when the heartwarming family talk comes in, this is not exactly a heartwarming family show that you need to take seriously, so perhaps it's just a 22-minute plus commercials potato chip that you can snack on but not necessarily fill up on.
Is Rocky Johnson going to go work for the opposition? He seemed open to it when the guy presented him with that ham or whatever it was.
Yeah, and the fucking... There have been guys that have been swayed to go work for the opposition by large amounts of money, but never by fucking hams. And sometimes they're motivated by revenge or hatred or money or whatever, but not ham. Anyway, I tell you what, though, especially because as Young Rock mentioned, they were hungry in some of those days. Maybe Rocky Johnson would go work for the opposition for a good, healthy breakfast. What do you think?
I think that would be a great idea, let alone I think he would do it. Of course he would do it.
I think he would do it if we gave him the magic spoon. Folks, Rocky Johnson and anybody else, you will work opposition. You will work for your worst enemy. You will crawl across hell with gasoline britches on for a taste of the magic spoon. Magic Spoon cereal is the best tasting and healthiest cereal going today because, you might not want to eat cereal like when you were a kid because the carbs and the sugar and the fat and etc. But no, healthy breakfast does not have to be boring. And now, we mentioned it on the last program. Not only are the existing Magic Spoon flavors available like cocoa and fruity and frosted, peanut butter and cinnamon, but for an amazing limited time offer this month only, we're talking about cookies and cream and maple waffle. They have been added to the selection of Magic Spoon. Still 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, and only 140 calories a serving. Keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, and GMO-free. You know what those GMOs are? One of the listeners told us genetically modified organisms. Well, Magic Spoon is not going to creep show you. You're not going to turn into a green thing like Stephen King did. Folks, right now you can build your own box. You can build your own custom bundle. You can do anything you want, and there's a money-back guarantee, the happiness guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. Go to magicspoon.com/Jim. I told you everybody likes to /Jim. Magicspoon.com/Jim to grab the new limited edition cookies and cream or maple waffle or build a custom bundle of all the flavors and try them today. And be sure to use the promo code Jim at checkout to save $5 off your order. And now this is good anywhere in the U.S. or Canada. Canada's figured in now too, but only when you use our code at checkout, Jim. So magicspoon.com/Jim. Use the code Jim at checkout to save $5 off. Magic Spoon, cookies and cream, maple waffle. What more can they do? That was not a rhetorical question.
I didn't know what to say. They can do anything they want because they're delicious.
What more can they do? They can't do anything more. They've done it. They've dropped the cow. How do they follow this? I don't know.
The cow.
You don't remember the Saturday Night Live wrestling sketch? First season, 1975. It was the bees, Belushi, the killer bees, right? Belushi and, oh gosh, who was the other bee? May have been,
well, they had various bees. Elliot Gould was a guest bee at various times.
I'm trying to think who the other bee in this sketch was, but he was the killer bees against the wasps. It was Aykroyd and Jane Curtin, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. They had a little wrestling ring there. And Aykroyd was dressed up in a suit and had a briefcase. And the wasps wrestled the bees. And I think it may have been, goddamn, was it Chevy Chase who was doing the wrestling announcing? But finally, the announcer says, and can they, will they, for the last bit of the climactic point of the sketch. And then suddenly a fucking big rubber cow drops from the ceiling into the ring. Yes, they've dropped the cow. The match is over. You can't follow it after you've dropped a cow.
I guess not.
I've used that before in finish meetings. And boom, boom, boom. And then we drop the cow. And everybody looks at me like, what the fuck? Anyway, speaking of dropping the cow, Bobby Lashley has won the championship. Did you hear about this? You read about this?
I did. I saw a clip and I read about this.
Help me with the history, Brian, because which world champion did Miz beat at the big show recently when he cashed in the briefcase?
He beat Drew McIntyre. Which we were questioning as soon as it happened.
We're like, certainly he's not going to WrestleMania as champion. So then, less than a week later, he loses in convincing fashion to Bobby Lashley. So now we hopefully will get the match that we were wanting, which was Lashley and McIntyre, correct?
Well, there are people who think that. The other rumor was Lashley and Lesnar, but I don't think that seems as likely right now. But obviously Lashley and McIntyre makes sense, and although not built up the way I would, with McIntyre dropping the title to The Miz, in WWE fashion, it does kind of make sense.
The writers set and figured out over a 3 or 4 hour period of time how that they could use some kind of convoluted logic to justify all of this. And it figures in that Lashley lost his U.S. title without losing in the 3-way match. Blah, 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 blah. We mentioned that at the time. So Bobby Lashley comes out after a match that he was in that he did not win and then beats up Drew McIntyre. But then here comes the Miz and blah, blah, blah. So they figured out a way to make it make sense in their minds, as whether or not it is the best method of promoting a major championship match at WrestleMania is another question. But then again, they don't need to sell any tickets anyway, so who gives a flying French fried titty fuck, right? But as a match, it was what it was supposed to be, or what it should have been, which was Bobby Lashley being completely physically dominant over the Miz running and ducking, and it being a lumberjack match, and him having to be thrown back in and getting no offense and being treated like a dish rag and then beat flat in the middle, 1, 2, 3, like a plate full of piss. But then doesn't it make your fucking company and your championship look like shit when a person that ineffective and ineffectual and unthreatening could, even following whatever bizarre rules you have in place at the time, become one of your world champions? Does that make sense?
Again, if you wanted to get the title on Lashley, so that I guess the idea would be that McIntyre gets another title win at WrestleMania this year, maybe there'll be some fans there this time.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on now. You think then they'll turn around and have McIntyre beat Bobby Lashley at this point now in a month?
I was thinking that was the goal, was to give McIntyre a win with fans.
Oh, for Christ's sake. Well, that'd be even worse than what they've done so far. They need to get somebody over and stick with it. For fuck's sake. Look at Bobby Lashley. You can believe him. Who was their previous box office champion when they actually had a box office? Brock Lesnar, because you could believe him. If anything, I would try to talk Brock into coming back and putting Lashley over at WrestleMania just to further strengthen him, and then let him run with this thing for a fucking year and do the same thing they should have done with Drew McIntyre. he beats Brock Lesnar, and then he's got beat, he's lost the title at least twice that I've seen. It hadn't even been a year since he beat Brock Lesnar. So why don't we just admit that we fucked up again, spend a year rehabilitating poor Drew, and run with what you've got right now and bring Brock in and have him put fucking Lashley over, and then let Lashley knock over a series of guys to get over and establish himself as a champion, not one of the champions, one of the champions. If you were going to have a match between Bobby Lashley and The Miz, that's the kind of match they should have. But for it to be the way that Bobby Lashley wins the WWE Championship, or one of them, is just... Can you imagine if it went from Pat O'Connor to Buddy Rogers to Lou Thez to Gene Kiniski to George South to Dory Funk Jr.? Lashley didn't beat anybody to win it. He didn't have a triumphant... I know he's a heel, so that might get him heat, but you've still, if you're going to put your belt on somebody, you've got to fucking make them credible. And this was the least effective way of making somebody physically credible, to just beat up The Miz. And with the title being bounced around so often back and forth, people win it and lose it on fucking Raw or whatever. It takes a year to get a guy over in a spot like that. It doesn't take a fucking week or a win. So I don't know, I'm glad he has it, but geez, they couldn't even have bothered to try to get the guy over by putting it on him instead of just making it a TV angle, a disposable thing for that week.
Of course, this also means we won't get The Miz defending the title against Bad Bunny at WrestleMania.
Well, thank God. I was worried that they'd put the Bunny over, because he's more over than The Miz. Apparently he's more over than everybody else they've got too, but that would be a further fucking downhill slide for, I don't know who. I guess Bugs Bunny is more popular in today's world than David Arquette was in his, so WCW would still have the ignominious advantage.
See, that's one of the things about David Arquette. David Arquette wasn't, he's not George Clooney, and I'm not defending the idea of putting the title on George Clooney or a Brad Pitt or one of the major stars. He was David Arquette. Such a notch below. Bad Bunny is a big, significant star right now. I will say this too. We don't watch because WWE is awful and it's painful. We do the pay-per-views, but weekly television is a rough go. But a lot of people who get in touch with us rave about the Hurt Business. MVP is the, manager. Now he is a cane. I think because he's actually injured. I don't know if he needs the cane or not. But also Shelton Benjamin, Cedric Alexander, and Lashley. Everyone says they're one of the best things in wrestling.
Well, every time we see them, they look good. They're doing serious shit. They're not jacking around. They're not, just interchangeable gymnasts. I can see, once again, if it wasn't such a slog to watch the programs as a whole and the filler and the bad comedy and the skit writing that we get foisted off on us, it would be wonderful to be able to see Heyman and Roman Reigns together, or the Hurt Business do their thing. But it's you get 10 or 15 minutes of some brief enjoyment in the middle of 3 hours of fucking dreck. I don't know. Speaking of dreck, are the Wednesday Night Wars coming to an end? Am I hearing that there's potential that NXT will be moved to Tuesdays because of live sports programs and in the NBC family or something like that?
I believe they are moving hockey programming to the USA Network, and that's the public reason as to why NXT potentially would be moving after WrestleMania off Wednesdays.
Now, you're not going to be a conspiracy theorist and say, oh, they're wanting an out so they can move NXT away. You said that's the public reason.
I don't think WWE has much say in the matter. The NHL games are going to get
priority
on the nights that they actually play, yeah.
But see, that's the thing is, if anybody thinks, for one thing, that the war, as we've mentioned, has been kind of a popcorn fart. But
it isn't a war. You can't even call it a war.
Now it's just two shows on at the same time. But if anybody thinks this is a sign that AEW has won and NXT is backing down or whatever, I can see it being a network decision that they've got a more valuable property they're going to put in that slot, so move the NXT show to another night, and I think it'll probably add, maybe 100,000 people to either show or both shows if they're not against each other. There's some people that would have been watching one or the other that have not, that now will end up in both places, but it ain't going to be a significant change, I don't think, on either side. But that's just kind of a flat ending to this whole thing. One side brings in Shaquille O'Neal and gets 100,000 extra people than what they usually get. And the other side,
they did a little better than that, I think.
Well, it was 900 and something thousand instead of 800 and something thousand or whatever. Maybe if 700 and something thousand is more their usual. Yeah. You know what? We ought to get some enterprising person with more time and patience than either you or I have, to go back and total up how many people have watched AEW on Wednesday nights since it debuted and how many people that have watched NXT on Wednesday nights since it debuted, and figure out what the overall total is for that, and then determine the percentage over a long haul. What percentage was AEW in the lead by? But anyway, it's just kind of a flat ending to this. It went out with a whimper rather than if they're going to move the show, it goes out with a whimper instead of a bang, because that, like I said, AEW could bring in Shaquille O'Neal and everybody else and can't get past 1 million people, and NXT had us kind of hooked and then ran us off. It was so bad. And it's like, bleh, nothing's going anywhere. So maybe they should move. Maybe they should move all these wrestling shows to like between 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning, where we wouldn't have to be subjected to it. What do you think?
All kidding aside, there should be some weekend wrestling shows. Everything is during the week. There should be stuff on the weekends.
Well, and here's another thing, since we're on the subject. I double dog dare you, except maybe in a major market like New York or Los Angeles, a major television market, that just TV time was at a premium. I double dog dare you to find a television wrestling program on any station in America in the 1970s that was on a different day besides Saturday or Sunday. I used to collect TV guides every time we went out of town from the time I started watching wrestling, whether it was to go see more wrestling or just go visit family. I would get a TV guide and look up the wrestling shows and where they aired. And I would read the old wrestling newses that had the National TV Wrestling Guide, where all the fans would send in the station and time and day that they watched wrestling in their town. And remember, because you've got the files. There would be like a 2-page list of all the various wrestling programs in America in the wrestling news. None of them were on any other day besides Saturday or Sunday, because they were all locally and regionally syndicated. The TV stations had more time to play with on the weekends. Plus, you didn't put sports programs on during the day on weekdays, because most of your audience was at work, and weeknights until after your news was network programming. So the wrestling shows were all on weekend, usually Saturday and Sunday afternoons or nights. And then Lance Russell in the early mid 60s with the Memphis show decided to counter program cartoons with something for the adults, quote unquote, and put the wrestling show in Memphis on Saturday mornings. And suddenly that was the highest rated show. Well, not suddenly, it was already a highly rated show, probably still one of the highest rated shows in town. But then it became the highest rated show and had the biggest kids audience, opposite cartoons on the other networks, because the whole family was watching. So now we've lost that with all this the national cable, it's all about one specific time on one specific day to watch one specific promotion. And the available nights are, weekend nights now. But I still get people ask me, well, you're just mad because you couldn't get Smoky Mountain Wrestling on national TV. We never tried. There was the antithesis of what we were trying to do. None of the other promotions, with very few exceptions, and they didn't end well, were trying to get on national TV. They were trying to get the strongest regional TV network they could get so that they could make money off of it. Anyway, so many things. There's so much of this shit that is so old that everybody sooner or later will come around and figure it out again, and then they'll think they thought of it, and then maybe in 50 years the wrestling business will be back. We just won't be around to see it. But they'll think it's all new shit that they just thought of for the first time.
With AEW apparently adding a second TNT show at some point, you think it'll be on a weekend? You think it'll be on a Saturday?
Oh, God. I don't know. What day of the week would you like your week ruined on now going forward?
Yeah, I didn't say we had to watch it.
Anyway, if Big Show's on it, it may be better than the one they're doing right now.
No, he's on the new YouTube show.
Well, if they get a second TV show on TNT and Big Show's not one of the announcers, then they're even way stupider than I already give them credit for.
So you think he's going to be a good commentator?
You saw, I don't want to get into the review, which we'll do here just in a few minutes, but you saw at least when he came out on the show, he had some personality. He's well-spoken. He's witty. He's funny. He's used to doing a variety of television. I don't know how he's going to be at the nuts and bolts of commentary, but if Tony will wake up from his coma that he's in and do that part of it, then it'll certainly be better than fucking excrement screaming Japanese tope con heroes at us all the time.
I think it's Mexican,
but just for name value, I don't care if he was a fucking mute. They've signed put him out there and fucking let him write fucking notes like Dutch Mantel used to during the Smoky Mountain shows and just hold him up like while Bob Caudle is talking. I don't care. Get him on the fucking national cable show rather than YouTube. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. I got one more wrestling topic from another email that it tickles me. This is not quite as tickling as the previous one. It's a legitimate question. But Rick asked, please elaborate on how the NWA champion was booked, how the schedule worked, and how the champion knew where to be and how to get there. Plane ticket versus you drive, etc. Were all payoffs in cash? Did Flair have thousands on him at all times? Can the champion say no to the office? A lot of questions there. But, I mean, a lot of people have seen on Twitter recently, some of the historians have dug up in their research and found some of the old NWA champions booking schedules on the official NWA letterhead, right? Where it would say January 1st, Atlanta, January 2nd through 7th, Florida, January 8th, St. Louis, etc. And he'd go for a few months, right? You've seen a bunch of those.
Yeah, I think Matt Farmer actually tweeted out.
Yes.
Not too long ago, one of those. For Flair.
For Flair, and other people have tweeted out when Harley was champion or whatever, this was his schedule for a couple months. And it's so cute because some people said, well, look, at least 2nd through the 7th, he's in Florida so he can relax. And that meant you were in the Florida territory. If they just put on the NWA champion schedule 2 through 7 Florida, that meant the 2nd you were in Tampa, the 3rd you were in St. Pete, the 4th you were in Miami, the 5th you were in Tallahassee, 6th you were in Jacksonville. If they had a double shot on a Sunday, you were there at both of them. So they just listed Florida or Charlotte instead of the Carolinas. You'd be in Charlotte for several days in a row. But those schedules show that the NWA champion was working almost every day of the month in multiple territories for 2 and 3 months at a time. And then you'd have the one, it would say October 4 through 7, Charlotte, October 8th fucking Dallas, October 9th, you'd be back in the Charlotte territory. Yeah, but you had to go out and make that one Dallas shot because it might be a big show at Reunion Arena. Or, what some of those were just ridiculous. You had to go to St. Louis because St. Louis was the crown jewel of the NWA. So whatever territory you were in, you had to come back and make the St. Louis show. Who booked the schedule was usually Sam Muchnick until what period in the 70s when he turned it over to Jim Barnett?
Maybe when Terry became champion?
Possibly, when Muchnick was getting older and, But the point was that usually the NWA champion, or in Barnett's case, he was the secretary treasurer, but someone high up in the NWA kept the NWA champion's dates, had a separate book just for him, whoever that title was bestowed on, and then that champion would get the instructions from the person in the NWA that was booking him. And it was Sam Muchnick usually, especially for so many years at the start, because he was the one that knew all the promoters and could make sure there was no tomfoolery going on with the belt and et cetera, et cetera. But promoters months out, just like with Andre the Giant, would contact the NWA office and say, when can I get the champion? They might be booking so far ahead there'd be a title change, but they would just want the NWA champion to come in for their big show or come in for a series of shows 4 or 5 days that week or whatever. And so the guy booking the champion would keep those dates in his book and would forward whatever the means was at the time. They used to do telegrams, mail packages, because the champion didn't always live in St. Louis. So periodically his shit would be delivered to his house. Then when faxes came in and et cetera. And then also not like 2 months of plane tickets would show up at Harley Race's house, in one package. A lot of times the offices would work together. The champion, before he left home for a tour, would have most, if not all, of his tickets to get him back. Or elsewise, if it was a long tour and he was going to be gone 2 or 3 weeks at a time or over to Japan, there would be packages sent along the way. And it wasn't unusual. Ask Flair, ask Dory, Terry, anybody. When something might change and you're on the road, you would go in your pocket and you would get yourself a plane canceled or a show canceled, or I got to get back to somewhere else, or there's bad weather coming in. The champion knew that he was too valuable to the operation to just sit around and wait to be told what to do or how to get somewhere. So he would take it upon himself to get where the next place he had to be was, and then he would get his money back from the office. And that goes for most of the top guys in the territories. I bet Lawler was on the way to Evansville one time when he lived in Hendersonville. So it was only a 3-hour drive, but he was on, I think it was 24. He wasn't even to the Tennessee state line. He hits a fucking deer, runs across the road, tears his car up. He's stuck. So he was close enough to Nashville. He was able to somehow get a ride back. And so many people, or Jerry Jarrett and those guys, they knew so many people in Nashville from promoting there for so many years. They got him out to the airport and got him in a chartered plane and got him to Evansville in time to work the main event, because they had 1,000 people there that would have been highly fucking pissed if Lawler didn't make it. But, so there was obviously a level of the office having taken care of everything for the guys, but they also had to be able to think on their feet. And you've heard stories guys used to, in the old days, before even jet planes or before the interstates, where they would have these hell trips and crawl across broken glass to get to St. Louis or major towns. And that was part of being a champion. You didn't just put the belt on the best wrestler, you put the belt on the guy that you could depend on. That's why it was so rare that it was ever switched in those days. Were all payoffs in cash? Not necessarily. Sam Muchnick did. That's why guys like to work St. Louis. And remember, Bruiser used to tell the story if his payoff was supposed to be $752.26, based on Muchnick's formula for calculating the gate, he would get an envelope with that money in cash, including a quarter and a penny in it. a lot of territories paid by check, although the champion could always get a cash draw out of the box office at any town he was at, but they would pay by check. But you weren't going to, the one thing you weren't going to do if you were an NWA promoter in those days was bounce a check to the NWA champion, because you also were sending a check to the NWA for the booking of the champion. That's why either Muchnick or Barnett or somebody trusted did it. They got, what was it 5% in the early days and then 3%, or was it always 3%?
I'm not sure. It was definitely 3% in the later years, but I'm not sure.
And that's the point, is the promoters a lot of times would pay by check, and they'd have to send a statement in, because the champion in the glory days was getting a percentage of the house. And whether it was 8 for the champion and 3 or 5 for the NWA or whatever the case, that was different with every gate. There was no guarantee per se, but the champion also didn't get booked in many of the small towns, and definitely not when Muchnick had control, so he didn't have to worry about going into a $50 payoff. Did Flair have thousands on him at all times? Yes, until he got to the bar. Then he had literally tens on him, if that. But no, a lot of the guys then in those days, yes. We've mentioned I have copies of the payoff ledgers of the St. Louis Wrestling Club for the St. Louis payoffs, and I've talked to guys that in the office in the WWF, a sellout crowd world championship match in St. Louis, we know for a fact, was worth $6,000 or better to each guy in it in the late 70s, early 80s. Around that same time, mid-70s, a main event championship match in Madison Square Garden for the challenger was worth $5 or $6 grand. George Steele was a good head for remembering figures and house figures and payoffs of the different eras and everything, so I've tried to glean information from him. And, you know, a lot of times guys wanted cash. So, yes, there was a lot of cash being carried around in those days. And can the champion say no to the office? It depends on which office. Champion could always say no to the regional office, although they tried to work as best they could, especially depending on who it was. To the NWA office itself, yes, I'm sure that all the champions had disagreements with Muchnick or Barnett or whatever, but overall, it was a give and take thing where it wasn't just even the NWA champion back then was not demanding creative control. It was just that it was a guy that was smart enough to the business that he knew a stupid finish or a good finish when he heard one. So I'm sure there were plenty of discussions of finishes back and forth, but it wasn't like the champion was going to say, no, I'm not going to go to fucking Kansas City that week. You know, that was part of the job. You pretty much took the schedule. That's why all the guys that got the title and wanted it and worked hard for it eventually asked to fucking drop it, because they would crack eventually, except Flair.
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, did anyone enjoy that lifestyle and that schedule more than Flair?
No, Flair's the only one that never asked out that I can think of. Terry gave it up on purpose. Dory gave it up on purpose. Briscoe gave it up on purpose. Harley was an Iron Man, but even then, I think there was, a couple times there he was like, especially after the long run, wasn't he like, it's ready, I'm time for me. But Flair loved it. He would have done it forever. He was the only person who, as Arn used to say, he's not from here. He's from another planet. He was the only one that could do it.
A planet filled with kamikazes, I imagine.
Thez, it took Thez, remember in the 50s, he had it 8 years straight. And that was before interstates and when the rings were a lot harder. And then finally he was like, okay, it's time for me to leave. So that he was probably second place Iron Man. And with Bruno, not the NWA title, but Bruno gave it up both times.
Bruno gave up the opportunity to unify the NWA and WWF titles in a match with Thez because he was already sick of the WWF schedule. He didn't want the NWA schedule too.
Yeah. but he didn't give up the opportunity single-handed, because Lou Thez gave up the opportunity for him when they wouldn't give Thez $100,000 to do the job.
That's true.
So it was never going to happen, because if the only way they would have had that match is if Bruno could have won it, and the only way that Bruno could have won it, all respect to Bruno, for heaven's sake, is if they'd have paid Thez the $100,000. And what would that be today, in today's money, from the 1966? $500,000, $750,000, something like that. Anyway, you know what? You know the best way to study these incredible facts and figures that we're spitting out to the people? You know the best way to do that, Brian?
I'm not sure, but to answer your question, approximately $807,000.
There you go. All they'd had to pay Lou Thez was $807,000 to do a job for Bruno, and they could have had the one and truly only world championship. And they could have fucking put 40,000 people in Shea Stadium. So they'd have made some of it back right there. But anyway, the way to listen to all these things, Brian, you'll never guess, it's with Raycon Earbuds. The Raycon wireless earbuds that sound great. It's just like that old saying, taste great, less filling. They sound great, but they don't hurt your ears. They don't have wires and stems sticking out of them. They come in a range of stylish colors. The comfortable in-ear fit. You can listen to things you want to listen to rather than the outside world nattering away at you. Water, sweat-resistant construction. I don't dunk my head underwater. I'm not a person that does that, but if you're a person that does, you can still get away with it. You can pair these things to your Bluetooth, even all of your Bluetooth. However many you don't have as many Bluetooths as you used to, Brian. You had a couple pulled, but you can pair these to your Bluetooth or your green tooth, your brown tooth, whatever color tooth you have. Enough battery life for 6 hours of playtime so you can unplug and you can listen to the average John Moxley interview within 6 hours. And the best part, great sound accessible to everyone, starting at half the price of other premium audio brands. Folks, Raycon is one of our favorite sponsors. We talk about them often, and the fans love them. And right now, Raycon's offering 15% off everything on their site just for the cult of Cornette. Go to buyraycon, BUYRAYCON, buyraycon.com/JCE. And that's it. That's the heavy lifting. You're going to get 15% off your entire Raycon order. So you can grab a pair for you and a spare pair for you. I've mentioned my Aunt Gretel. She got 2 pair and then gave one of them away. Not one pair, just one earbud, because that way she had one for each of her ears. And little Geppetto, her son, was able to use his for the one ear that he had, because it was they shared a lot of chromosomes in that family. Anyway, go to buyraycon, BUYRAYCON.com/JCE and get 15% off your entire Raycon order. 15% off at buyraycon.com/JCE. Did I ever tell you about my little cousin Geppetto?
I don't believe so.
He worked for a furniture manufacturer. One day he's in the plant, and he reaches over for his bottle of Coca-Cola, and he takes a big drink and drinks it all down, but it was a bottle of furniture polish instead. Dropped down on the floor right there, killed him graveyard dead. Furniture polish. It was a horrible way to go, but a beautiful finish.
Awful.
It was awful.
Terrible
awful,
joke.
Awful,
Oh,
terrible
God.
tragedy. Terrible tragedy. What are you doing over on your programs this week?
This week, get information about all the shows on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, on Twitter, at Superpodcast, or on Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. And don't forget to check out the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube channel to check out videos of the various podcasts with great artwork by Jake Hammer up right now, the official Arcadian Vanguard YouTube channel. A few notes here, Jim. This week, Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdrin and Barry at BowdrinPod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The voice of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Kevin Kelly, returns to the show for a fun episode Check it out today at BaldrinPod.com. Once again.
Has Kevin been stuck in Japan through the whole epidemic or pandemic or whatever? Is he out of that little cell they had him in now?
I believe he has been broadcasting from the stateside.
Stateside. That's even better.
But hear more on Breaking Kayfabe with Baldrin and Barry.
He's got a bird's nest on the ground then, doesn't he?
Wherever you find your favorite podcast.
He can do the commentary from the side of his own state and not have to go to Japan.
This week on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, then and now, out right now at pwspod.com or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Of course, John Arezzi and myself go back and review his landmark radio show, Pro Wrestling Spotlight. We are talking about shows from 30 years ago. This is a show that broke a lot of big news, had a lot of big moments that were historically significant, and it's also a show that every now and then descended into kayfabe hell. And this week on the show, Herb Abrams is back with Steve Dr. Death Williams cutting the most cringeworthy promos you've ever heard. Also, Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff calls in.
Wait a minute. Herb Abrams and Doc together. I wonder if there were any pharmaceuticals and narcotics, as you said.
It's Herb, Dr. Death, and before that it's Herb and Paul Orndorff. And Paul Orndorff says, where he grew up in Tampa, they used to have blanket parties, where if one of the kids was a jerk, they would wait for him and throw a blanket over his head and kick the crap out of him.
And kick the shit out of him, yeah.
And he's going to do a blanket party on Dr. Death. Dr. Death doesn't understand the concept, so he starts talking about the blood blanket. Doesn't really know what he's talking about. But that's on the show. Also in studio, Cactus Jack. This is great stuff because this is right where Mick Foley's promos go from being more like Dude Love to being the classic Cactus Jack. And he's on fire here. Plus, Paulie Dangerously, scheduled to be there, scheduled to be at the Christmas party on this day. Doesn't show up. He claims he's in Maui.
No showed the Christmas party.
But we have a phone call. He called in to talk about his upcoming confrontation with Lawrence Taylor, and he took some phone calls. Jim, let me play this for you right now. This is the kind of content that we play and review on Pro Wrestling Spotlight then and now. Check this out.
Scalise from Queens?
Who? Who?
Who is this?
Yes, this is Scalise. Is that your first name or your last?
My first.
What's your last name?
What? John.
What?
John. Scalise John. Okay,
Scalise
what can we do for you? First time caller from Queens.
Remarks to Paulie.
Yeah.
First of all, during Starcade,
Yeah.
he made a remark that Bobby Eaton left his partner because Stan Lane was going out with Yoko Ono.
Yeah, Stan Lane's dating Yoko Ono.
What kind of remark is that to say about a guy who, along with Bobby Eaton, carried the first 3 pay-per-views in 1990 for the NWA?
He carried him. Where'd he carry him to?
Him and Bobby Eaton made the show.
I'm not denying that.
He left the NWA. That's no way to talk.
Stan Lane left the NWA because he's dating Yoko Ono. It's a known fact.
And also, how come every morning on Saturday on WPIX, all you and Jim Ross talk about is football? Well, why don't you get with the program there?
Why don't you get with the program? What's the main event at the Meadowlands?
What? Yeah, well, you don't...
Wrong. Not. Oh yeah. The main event is a football match between Lex Luger and the Big
It's
Cat.
not the main event.
What?
The main event.
What?
It's not the main event.
What's the featured match? What's the match that Lawrence Taylor's involved in? What's the match that was featured in the National? What's the match that was featured in USA Today? What's the match that was featured in the New York Post? Tell
But
me.
there's
Sounds
also
like
a world
Abbott
title
Costello.
What's the
match.
program? Answer the
World
question.
title matches also. That's usually a main event
John,
at any
I'm
arena
not
that comes
claiming.
from.
Wait, Scalise, I'm not
Scalise,
claiming
thanks
to
for
be
your
the
call.
authority on this,
Thanks,
but
John.
Paulie,
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
John, just on a random poll that I've conducted myself,
Okay.
most people who are going to the Meadowlands are going to see the
LT,
football match.
okay.
That's right.
All right,
And
Steve.
they're coming there because they know you're going to be there too, Jack.
Yeah. I mean, we may have a surprise in store.
Well, there it is. Paulie Dangerously taking phone calls. Cactus Jack in studio.
What's the name of the guy that's going to be at the medley? Who's the name of the guy that's going to be? I don't know. He's on third. We're not talking about him.
The Midnight Express broke up because of Stan Lane dating Yoko Ono. There's a new twist.
Oh, no.
Hear more today. Oh, yes. At pwspod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Oh,
John-
yes. That'll be like Matt Hardy doing the cross between Paul Bearer and Paul McCartney last week on Cameo.
That was awful. But check out John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight then and now wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And, of course, the 605 Superpodcast, the Mothership! Thank you. Go through the archives today at 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Stay tuned for 605 Super Podcast news in the coming weeks. The Mothership! Hey! As Larry Zbyszko would say, boo on me!
This sounds like the crowd on the Young Rock at the flea market. Well, there's an introduction for you to the main event program that they had over at All Petite Wrestling. Although they did, with Shaquille O'Neal appearing on this one program, they increased the aggregate weight of their entire talent roster by about 38%. Don't you agree? 'Cause he's as big as any three other guys on the roster.
He is massive.
So, I don't know what everybody's been. Oh, what are you going to say about the big mixed tag team match, Cornette? What are you going to say? Some people, I understand, liked this. Is that what you're hearing?
A lot of people liked it. I thought it was all right.
There were some parts of it that were all right if you just viewed it in a vacuum, but the whole psychology of and backstory of and how this came about and what we're supposed to think about it and who were we supposed to cheer for, and I've never seen a celebrity crossover with a person of this magnitude, of a mainstream star, that was built worse, laid out worse, and more confusing for the viewer to watch than this in my 40 years in wrestling.
I don't disagree with that.
Well, you just said it wasn't that bad.
Again, in a vacuum. Forget about the build-up. The build-up was one of the Hall of Fame bad builds to a match in the history of wrestling. But as an actual match, an actual spectacle, seeing what Jade Cargill could deliver, seeing what Shaq could do, I thought they were good. I thought Red Velvet was good. Cody, I can't stop looking at that neck tattoo, which still looks so stupid a year later. The only part I really, really hated was the stuff on the floor, like Shaq going at it with the fans there. QT must have been there to coach everyone through the match, but
yeah, he was probably QT Marshall was down there at ringside going, the next spot is like Garrett Morris doing the news for the hard of hearing.
And again, I see the benefits. I don't agree with it, but I see the benefits of Shaq going through the tables because that's the spot that you send around to get people to talk about. But the setup of the two tables being there for no reason, Red Velvet having to open a table, that was the worst part of the match.
Let's go through it in order, because I'm going to get you to see things my way, that this was an incredibly, this was a wasted opportunity of gargantuan, epic, biblical proportions. Yes, they got some mainstream news for Shaquille going through the fucking tables. Who are we supposed to cheer for? We've got a beloved sports icon and a bitchy bodybuilder against the son of a wrestling legend that's a babyface in the normal program, and his partner's a stand-in because his original partner got pregnant. They showed a video package to explain, as I believe JR, one of the announcers said, the story of how we got there, and it was comprised of a bunch of people slapping each other in the face and throwing water on each other. And when they make the entrances, yes, people are cheering Shaq, but then it's Cody and Cake against Shaq and Flake is what I wrote down, by the way. Flake comes out, good old Jade Cargill, and she's obviously a heel with her attitude and presentation from day one, but Shaq comes out, and he's a beloved sports figure, but Cody out there in Red Velvet is happy to be involved. And I would have thought that Cody would be the most impressive person in the match, and that he and Shaq would do simple things, but that the match would make sense. Well, they did do simple things, but the match didn't make sense. I thought that Red Velvet would be, as she was probably overall the smoothest thing in this match. I was hoping that Jane would look like a fucking deer on ice. But she's one of these people that she can do the complicated stuff. Like she did the fucking what was that goddamn awkward, the big chicken, the finish, right? The big double chicken wing like Flair and Steamboat used to do into the face plant. She did that and it looked great, but she can't throw a kick. And I know she's green, so she's better than everybody, including me, probably thought she was, but everybody was saying, wow, it was so great, like it was the greatest debut of all. The girls, especially their first series, obviously they had worked out and gone through, and it was more like modern interpretive dance with strikes. They didn't actually nail most of the strikes, but they got close enough and they didn't completely fall apart, and they did their routine that they had practiced. As it went longer, their shit started to get a little bit more awkward because they're both green, especially Jane, and this a high profile position. But I just couldn't get over that Shaquille O'Neal finally wrestles, and it's in this. Him and a top babyface versus two hot heels in the WWE, even as recently as 4 or 5 years ago, could have set pay-per-view records. He could have made Tyson money in one night. I'm not talking about Tyson boxing money. I'm talking about the money they paid Mike Tyson in 98. He got what was it, $3 or $4 million? Shaquille O'Neal on a high-profile WWE pay-per-view up until the last 5 years when they just gutted him for the network, could have gotten a easily mid-7-figure payoff if he'd have chosen to do that. And he does this. And even in this atmosphere, and it's him deciding I'm going to do it now and on free television and for much less than $5 million, I'm sure, it couldn't make sense. Can you imagine if Shaquille O'Neal had choke-slammed a hot heel through that table and stood there with those big paws over the top of it? That would have been a Sports Center moment. That would have been played on everything, and it wouldn't have made everybody look like a fucking idiot. Cody and Shaq wasn't bad for the most part. It was easy and basic. Cody worked to put Shaquille's size over. I don't know who taught him how to do that overhand chop, but every time it looked like awkward and it would hurt at the same time because he was making contact, but it looked like his hand he felt was radioactive. He would look at it, hold it up in the air, whack it down on Cody's chest, and then bring it back up like, oh, it's glowing. Shaquille O'Neal did a head palm shoot off. They had to teach him that. They had to teach him that. A person who's never wrestled before would never do a head palm shoot off. It doesn't make any sense. He head palm shoot off Cody and then backdropped him. That's great. Wrestling 101. You got a big man take a backdrop. You got a big man fucking sell like Cody was selling. And you could tell they had told Shaquille to milk the chops, but I think he thought that meant that he had to stare at his hand like he had just discovered it was attached to his body. And then we're seeing a theme. Jane tags herself in. This is going to be going on all night, not just in this match. But when Jane tagged herself in, when Shaquille had Cody back in the corner and was going to give him another one, Jane just slaps Shaquille on the back, and Cody just looks and walks off. And here comes Red Velvet. I know that not only, besides the fact that the real rules of a real mixed tag team match, when one girl tags in, the other girl's got to get in, vice versa. Shaquille O'Neal was not in any way going to have any interaction where he had anything physical to do with a woman for all of his endorsements and etc. But does that mean Cody just has to walk off and get out of the ring and Red Velvet just comes in? Or couldn't they have done the thing where Cody and fucking Jane stare each other down for a second and the referee gets in and says, Cody, go tag Red Velvet and tag her and bring her in? It just was. Anyway, so the girls did the modern interpretive dance routine with strikes that I mentioned. And I guarantee you they could do that in their sleep move for move, because you could tell they had practiced it their entire exchange 1,000 times, because there was no spontaneity. And like I said, they were missing some of the stuff, but they were close enough and they kept moving where it didn't fall apart. And there, Jane can do the old SOS, the sack of shit slam Razor Ramon used to do, and do a nip up perfectly, but she kicks like an ostrich. And it's just like the guys, they can do these incredible back and forward flips off the top rope, can't throw a fucking punch. Anyway, so they're having this match. The guys did some shit, then the girls did some shit. Then suddenly Jane goes over and pie faces Cody. And Cody's reaction to that is to jump in the ring and run over and knock Shaquille off the apron on the floor. And then Shaquille is standing there, and suddenly the paid fans, the ones on the payroll, all the wrestlers around the ring, why did Billy Gunn's son just hit Shaquille O'Neal in the back with a chair for no apparent reason?
I think in storyline, although I'm not justifying this, because he is a member of the Nightmare family, and he was looking out for the other members of the Nightmare family that Shaquille O'Neal was in the match against. Makes no sense.
Shaquille O'Neal was standing on the apron of the ring when Cody ran across and nailed him off of it to the floor, and Shaquille is standing there going, "Why'd you do that?" And suddenly Cody's friend hits him from behind with a fucking chair. And then a bunch of people jump over the, well, he grabs the one guy and brings him over the rail, and a bunch of people attack Shaquille O'Neal, and Shaquille beats up 2 or 3 of them, including poor QT Marshall that was apparently there as the ringside coach, as you mentioned. And right after he does this, Red Velvet's up on the top rope suddenly and moonsaults off the top onto Cody, Jane, QT. They all go down. And then they rolled in the ring and started the match again with the girls and Cody and Shaquille out on the apron. What? Can fans just come and attack the participants from behind with a chair and the match goes on? I don't. So they start the match again, and the girls get a little more awkward this time. And Jane gets a figure 4 leg lock on Red Velvet, and Red Velvet reverses it, but Jane gets it back and then lets it go and starts posing. And this was a theme. They've told they've told Jane, pose a lot, flex your biceps. Every time she does anything successfully, including brushing her teeth, she flexes and poses. Then Jane goes out for no reason on the floor and pulls a table out from under the ring and takes forever to set it up. But then Red Velvet comes out and stops her and throws her back in the ring, and then Red Velvet gets another table and takes forever to set it up. Meanwhile, Shaq and Cody are just standing there looking at everybody. QT has to come up and help Red Velvet set up the table while telling her to get back in the ring, supposedly at the same time. Really, he was helping her set it up because it was taking forever. So Red Velvet gets in and promptly nearly fucking decapitates poor Jade Cargill with a potato spin kick to the fucking head. And then Red Velvet tags Cody. So that means Shaq has to get back in. Explain this one to me, Lucy. Shaquille stops Cody and power bombs him. And as he bends over and looks at Cody, Cody just fucking punches him in the face and pops right back up from the power bomb from this 7'1", 365-pound man. And then Shaquille runs at Cody for no apparent reason, and Cody gives him a half a slam. If you were going to slam Shaquille O'Neal, why would you slam him right after he had just power bombed you less than 10 seconds beforehand? That's not rhetorical either.
It doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. And for everyone who thinks Cody is some kind of wizard in the ring, he's not. He never has been.
Cody's the one that I thought knew that much. He's the one that I thought could put this together. Wouldn't it have made more sense if somehow Cody had got a slam on Shaquille and Shaquille powerbombed him? I don't fucking know. But here's the thing. Obviously, Shaquille O'Neal has never been in a ring. Because if they were going to do this much, everything that he did before with Cody could have verbally instructed him on in the back. And he could have got by with it. But this one, Shaquille O'Neal has never gone up for a slam. You could tell that. And I don't know why, except why that Cody would have wanted Shaquille coming toward him moving, except that he thought that if Shaquille, being that tall, could come forward and jump a little bit, that Cody could get under him enough to turn him and do a slam without. But you've seen people slam Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
Kamala, Harley Race, Hulk Hogan.
El
Cornette. Did you ever see anybody slam Andre when he was moving toward him, or was he standing still?
I think he was standing still.
There's a reason for that, because, and Andre weighed more than Shaq. If you know how to take a slam, you can post up enough that not everybody could do it. I still couldn't have slammed Andre, but a guy that's stout enough, it's big enough, and especially it's tall enough to just turn him, Andre could go with it. But with his weight and momentum coming forward, that would have made it almost impossible, even though he would post up, for a guy to turn and slam fully and properly a fucking guy of that weight. That's why he was always blinded or a finger poke in the eye. Oh my God. And he's standing there rocking, but he's in the same place. And then when the guy got under him, he could post up and he could help turn himself. So Cody apparently gave up on Shaquille being able to do any of that and just decided maybe if he's coming, I can get under him and turn him over. It didn't work. And it probably fucking gave Cody a hernia.
It was the worst slam since Luger and Yokozuna.
No, because Luger and Yoko was supposed to be like that. This was not. And Yoko also had 300 pounds on Shaq at the time anyway. But
and Yoko was also moving. He wasn't standing still.
And Yoko was, yeah. Well, Yoko, see, the thing is, if you go back and watch that, Yoko got a couple of steps and moved, but he went up to turn himself and to post himself. And if Luger almost got under him, it was close enough. So when I say moving, I'm not talking about taking a step into posting up. I'm talking about just coming at you, running from both feet like Shaq was. You can take a step up into it, but not just moving forward with he had no idea of how to fucking, once Cody got him in his arms, of what to fuck to do. He was just all dead weight. Anyway, the girls got back in and traded awkward forearms forever. Jane has a nice spine buster. That's another thing. She can't throw a fucking forearm without looking like she, a disconnected fucking bucket of body parts. But she had a beautiful spine buster. Then this again. Cody comes in and makes the save by basically pulling the heel girl off the babyface girl. And so then he runs over and pokes Shaq in the eye. So now Cody's a heel because he's poked Shaq in the eye. And Shaq was trying to get into position for this long before it was ready. And then Cody runs across the ring and crossbody Shaq, and they just fall backwards through the tables. What? So now poor Shaq, for breaking absolutely no rule that I can determine in this match whatsoever, has been attacked by some guy with a chair from behind, assaulted by numerous people not in the match. Cody has poked him in the eyes and now tried to kill him with that move just so they can get on SportsCenter. And then Jane milked the Shock for so long, shock in quotation marks, that even the referee was patting her on the back, turn around, because Red Velvet's there ready with Brandy's move, the spear. Brandy still had to get mentioned in this. Jane wouldn't turn around. So the director, it was so obvious, the director goes, well, we'll cut back to the shot of fucking Shaq and Cody on the floor. And that's when they did that. That's when Red Velvet came with the spear, because Jane finally turned around and they missed the spear. And it still wasn't the finish. And now the girls are going to continue working while Shaquille O'Neal, legendary basketball icon, is motionless on the floor. Jane picks Red Velvet up over her shoulder, and Jane is so tall, or let me try that again. Red Velvet picks Jane up over her shoulder, and Jane is so tall that her feet were still touching the mat when Red Velvet had her up, and then Jane reverses it and gives her the big face smash. 1, 2, 3. Jane gets up and starts posing and smiling at the camera again, and now they bother to remind us that Shaquille O'Neal, Basketball Hall of Famer, is unconscious and motionless on the floor. This was the most preposterous thing I've ever seen. From the build to the incomprehensible build to this match with people that no one was going to care about instead of established talent, to get a mainstream celebrity icon involved, a girl in her first match in front of people, an underneath girl that's a fill-in for the pregnant girl, and a baby face that's wrestling like a heel, and then the fucking celebrity, his team wins, but he's unconscious when it happens. And the heel girl that he's teamed with doesn't cheat, but still beats the babyface. And because the girls did some moves right, there's people on Twitter, see, they were great.
Yeah.
And then, as I wrote, this was the most preposterous thing I've ever seen. They out-preposterized themselves. They come back from the break. They load Shaquille in an ambulance. We see Shaquille O'Neal go in the ambulance, and JR blows the cue because he said, well, I think Tony's there, but Tony wasn't there yet. And they slam the doors, and then they go to an arena beauty shot of the lights in the ceiling so that they can take Shaquille out of the thing, because now they go back, and there's Tony standing behind the ambulance. And as you mentioned before in the show, he just decides that he has the power since they're not going anywhere. This guy's been motionless for 10 minutes, but they're not in a hurry to get to the medical facility with Shaquille O'Neal. The lights aren't going. The doors are closed. They're not playing the siren. They're just sitting there. So Tony says, well, I'll just open the thing up and see what's going on and get a word from the EMTs. And he opens the door, and like he would ever be able to do any of this. And Shaquille O'Neal is gone, and the EMT is just with his arms at his sides like, I don't know what happened. Now that was the most preposterous thing I've ever seen. And Shaquille O'Neal was never mentioned again.
Do you agree with this going on first?
I mean, at least it got it over with, but then you've blown your fucking... They could have milked this to a big number for their purposes in the last 2 segments, but then that would have been the flattest finish in the history of television. But they probably could have got a bigger number, although maybe Shaq just wanted to get the fuck out of there. Maybe he was double parked. He didn't seem to be in a hurry when he was in the ring, but he doesn't seem like a person who gets in much hurry.
I agree with you. The match layout was a complete mess, but I thought Jade was impressive for a first match. Thank God it was Red Velvet instead of Brandy. I don't think Brandy could have done any of this. I thought Red Velvet looked good. I thought she looked good in there.
No, she was the best one of the 4. It was still, there were awkward moments with her and Jane because Jane's green. Red Velvet's still green, but she was smoother than the rest of this bunch. But and
it continues the trend where every Cody match you have to have smoke and mirrors. You have to have all sorts of crap happening at ringside to hide the fact that Cody's actually not that good in the ring.
But here's the thing. They did smoke and mirrors with Ronda Rousey's debut, and it was a brilliant pro wrestling match.
Perfect.
A brilliant pro wrestling match, the best debut ever. There was still smoke and mirrors involved, but it was put together well. The build was understandable. Everybody was interested in seeing what was going to happen. They overperformed and out-executed in the actual match, and the fucking finish, the people were throwing babies in the air. The big spot was not the finish. It was done for publicity on non-wrestling programs. The pairing made no sense of any of these people to be together as partners or opponents. There was no focus on any thread in this match that made it make any sense. And Why do you fucking carry your goddamn mainstream celebrity out of the building and then have him disappear too? One wasn't bad enough. He couldn't just disappear or just be carried out. He had to be carried out and disappear.
He's the only person I've seen actually sell going through a table.
Yeah,
no one in wrestling does. He actually did it the way you probably should if you want to make it effective.
That horse has left the barn. And by the way, I would love to say that was the last person we see get put through a table on this particular program, but that would be just crazy. Any final thoughts on Shaq and Whack versus Cody and Cake?
The layout was a mess, but the performances by Jade and Red Velvet and even Shaq I thought were really good. Cody, I think, is overrated in the ring, and I always have. It was obvious why QT was at ringside, because he was coaching them live on TV of how to get through the match. And that's all I have to say about it. I thought Jade looked good. For everyone that was waiting for Jade to fail, I thought Jade looked pretty good.
I would use her on OVW television.
Better than Linda Miles, who you compared her to.
She was better than Linda Miles. I would use her on OVW television so she could learn on local TV with limited exposure. National TV, I'm afraid they've, as we've mentioned many times before, in the words of Bill Maher about Donald Trump, we let the fucking alien on the ship and it had eggs. Now she's going to be out there prancing and posing. Ay.
And I love it.
Well, at least the next match wasn't long. That's our usual complaint with most of these things. Felix and Pac. Now we've got 2/3 of Death Triangle. What do you get when you got 2/3 of a triangle?
I don't know.
Just a fucking right angle, I think. But anyway, they 90 degrees is what you've got. They came out and had a brief match against an unintroduced team of job guys. And I don't know who the fuck they were. And within 10 seconds, there was a double team thing that Pac and Felix did where Felix tried a leg sweep while Pac did a fucking clothesline or whatever. He missed the leg sweep by about 2 feet. They had the reanimated corpse referee in there so they could just do whatever they wanted. And they did a 4-way bunch of moves for about a minute and a half, and Felix and Pac won. Did they mention these guys' names? I missed it. I wasn't paying close attention.
I think they may have, and I don't remember what they were, but I had no problem with this. It was quick. It was
quick.
A squash match. Hypothetically, squash matches get the guys over.
How did they still manage to miss shit and be sloppy in a minute and a half, though?
It's just what happens.
Because they went out and tried to do a bunch of shit because they don't know how to get over in a minute and a half. Just beat these fucking guys. Hit one guy with 2 things and the other guy with 2 things, you're done. Anyway, Face the Press was next. Not Meet the Press, but Face the Press. Here was our Monday Night Raw segment from another one of these schizophrenic booking geniuses that's in charge of fucking this donkey every Wednesday night. Chris Jericho and MJF facing the press with a big press conference about their upcoming tag team title match and whatever else. And of course, that was the excuse for the whole show to turn into the big sing-along. Why are they all so happy at ringside to sing the heel song? I know, because they're getting paid to stand there at ringside and just sing a fucking heel song.
And it was live, so they didn't sing the chorus the second time because it was live, they couldn't dub in a second version of the chorus.
Well, at this point, I think they were also running long and probably anxious to get going. And this was supposed to be a press conference with members of the press. So what we got for members of the press was some pale, fishy, white, pasty-faced nerd with a microphone that didn't work asking a question that nobody heard. And then Jericho did a promo about the tag team titles. And then Turkey Tits got shouted down. And we got a guy from whatever Barstool Sports may be. Was there anybody from the Washington Post, the New York Times, MSNBC, some type of valid, legitimate news gathering operation here? No! Instead, the best question was asked by noted press reporter and podcaster Eric Bischoff, who apparently now, if anybody had Eric Bischoff in the pool of people who will go anywhere for a fucking payoff and do anything these days, the Bischoff is the answer we were looking for. Does he live in Florida?
I thought he lived in, Montana?
Montana is what I heard. Well, that's Montana, the reason for the Electoral College. The United States has been going to hell in a handbasket for the past 30 years because of the Electoral College. It's specifically so Montana won't feel left out. But he moved to Connecticut for Vince, and then Vince canned him, and he moved back to fucking Montana without taking a baseball bat to Titan Tower. I have no idea how that would work. And now he's in Florida in the middle of a pandemic to ask a question at a fake press conference. I got news for you. Whatever they paid him to go to Florida and ask a question on a fake news conference, not be worth going to Florida in the middle of a pandemic to ask a question on a fake news conference. But at least he's got a little personality. MJF had gone off about Grandpa Buck. I can't call him Papa Buck because now the Bucks have kids, so he's a grandfather. Plus, he's a 65-year-old fucking right-wing religious fanatic hippie with horrible fashion sense, so he should be a grandpa. And after this whole thing was over with, here finally the Bucks music starts, and they walk out like badasses, and Balding Buck does his hostage statement promo. Has he ever exhibited any amount of personality, or does he just constantly just stare and talk like that?
No, the other one is certainly the one that has the personality.
And it's all bad. Pieface, then he either credits or blames Papa Buck for who he and his brother are today. He was crediting, I say blame. But Papa Buck created this problem, so now we know who to put the heat on. And they actually said he couldn't afford to put him through college. But apparently he could pay for the finest gymnastics coaches. Because how else did they learn how to do all that shit they call wrestling? So then Pieface went so far as to say without Papa Buck, there wouldn't be any AEW. So this rotten bastard is to blame for everything. And then Pieface droned on forever while the heels had to stand there and listen to it. And then the Bucks start a fight.
But did you hear also he said that, what did he say? If it wasn't for them in AEW, Chris Jericho would be a curtain jerker at the Performance Center?
Jerking the curtain at the Performance Center.
This guy was your heavyweight champion a year ago.
Yeah. Well, because they're just trying to appeal to themselves and potentially some of the smart fans that they actually speak to in person. So I'm sure this shit gets over incredibly with their immediate family. But then they start the fight with the fucking heels that outnumber them already, and then immediately the ring fills up. Remember, we've had some of those angles where we say, where is everybody? Well, now they've got them on standby. Referees and whoever the fuck is running in there, and it's a big schmoz, and here comes Gallows and Anderson and bring out a table. And there's another table set up at ringside, and I swear to God, Brian, this is not even an hour into the program. 20 minutes beforehand, they just did the deal where Cody and Shaquille O'Neal went through the tables, and these two little self-absorbed, fucking smarmy-faced, obnoxious fucking twinks have to top that by one of them jumps off the entrance way and the other one jumps off the stage simultaneously, and they put two of the heels through two tables at the same time. 20 minutes after the previous fucking angle. And I know some people have said, no, they're just not smart. They just don't know. No, nobody's that stupid. They did it on purpose because in their little fucking pea-brain minds, their little goddamn infinitesimal fucking brains that they have, they thought that would get them over better than Shaquille O'Neal and Cody because they broke two tables at the same time and it was more complicated. And they wanted to step on the other guy's fucking angle. They're all out for themselves. They're all doing their own shit. Twinkle Toes does his shit. the Twinks do their shit. Jericho does his Monday Night Raw takeoffs and fucking dinner theater sketches. They're all doing their shit, and Tony Khan's not man enough, doesn't have the testosterone or the lead in his fucking pencil, or the knowledge, or the experience, or the personality, or the goddamn gall to just put his foot down and start telling some people what to fucking do.
And now they're going into the pay-per-view with the Bucks having gotten this revenge on the heels. The babyfaces destroyed the heels going into the pay-per-view.
Don't worry, they won't be alone. We'll get to that later. So anyway, now that they've stepped on Shaquille O'Neal's angle, they do a package for the exploding barbed wire death match with comments from Onita. He's got to be dyeing his hair, by the way, doesn't he? At this point?
I guess.
He's my age. No, he's older than me. Because they came to Tennessee in 81. Yeah, anyway. Poor Jim Ross had to be a talking head in this and speak about this somewhat seriously. I mean, I know he judiciously picked his words to not actually get as much on him as he was afraid he might, but exploding barbed wire death match. And they show the footage from the outlaw bullshit in fucking Japan. And I keep wondering what normal wrestling fans are thinking when they see this. And then I remember that there's no normal wrestling fans actually watching this program, but it's embarrassing. Anyway, so there was that. I got to say, the match of the night up next, our boys, they had a little bit more balls than maybe I've given them credit for in the past. Can you remember a match involving the Jurassic Express where Dwarf Dongsucker was so scarce and had less to do?
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure this one was it. Of course, they had to. He and Tully started, and Tully locked up with a little prick and turned him around in the corner, just peppered him with some gut shots and got right out. So at least he could say he did it, right?
What'd you think of JJ coming out with them?
Oh, and JJ looks the same. I love James. He always looks the same. I was glad to see him out there. At least, you know, if everybody's hopping in, let the people that deserve a payoff get a payoff out of this fucking guy while he lasts. But here's the thing. FTR, either Dax or Cash against Jungle Boy was flawless. What were you saw the wrestling spots performed well, great timing, nice setup. They always perform at a high level. Then we get the shoe spot. JJ hands the shoe in to start the heat on Jungle Boy, so we clearly know who the heels are and who the baby faces are. It was like suddenly wrestling broke out in the middle of this goddamn disaster. Did you notice Dino Douche was never in the first segment, never in until the fucking tag in the second segment? Because that way they could control the pace of the match. He wouldn't do anything stupid, sloppy, and awkward to fuck it up and derail the train. They go through a break. They come back. Jungle Boy's fighting from underneath, but they're continuing the heat. Then I got disappointed because after all that and the heat on Jungle Boy, simultaneous cold tags to Dino Douche and Dax at the same time. And they could have set that up. But is it just that the baby faces don't get the idea how to do a hot tag with hardly any fans in the building? Is that they're just rushing so bad nobody cares anymore? I don't know. But even here, Dino Douche's awkward-ass comeback looks better with FTR because they feed well for it, and they're in the right place. So he just has to stand there. He's still a little awkward, but it works. The one real offense that Dwarf Dongsucker got in this whole thing was when he jumped up on Dino's back and Dino tossed him Dwarf onto Tully. And I could buy that. If you toss a 98-pound sack of shit at somebody and catch it, it'll knock them down. And then that was the end of that, and Tully rolled out. And did you see as soon as he landed from that crossbody and got out from under the little prick and was rolling out, he said something to JJ, Tully did, as he's rolling out under the bottom rope, and I would have given $1 million to know what that was. Probably something to the effect of, James, can you believe it's come to this? Then the baby faces kept coming back, and they started doing more shit, and I guess it's modern tag team wrestling. After the hot tag and the baby face comeback, they still have to go 5 more minutes. Cash hit a great DDT on Dino Douche out on the floor. FTR hit Jungle Boy with the superplex and the splash. That looked great. All their shit looks great. Never fucking actually wins anything. They did a bunch of stuff. Tully finally grabbed the dwarf and did the slingshot suplex on the dwarf. That did my heart good. And Dino and Jungle Boy hits some kind of move, and then Jungle Boy dives out and wipes out a cameraman, who then gets up and hits Dino over the head with the camera. And then they do a triple spike pile driver and pin Dino Douche. So at least they didn't beat Jungle Boy. I wish they'd have fucking hospitalized the goddamn dwarf, but at least they beat the dinosaur. And the mask guy takes his mask off, and it's Sean Spears. Now he's got a bleach blonde mohawk. That's what he did with his time away for the last 4 months. We haven't seen him. He bleached his mohawk, and that was it. This was as good as it could have been because the dinosaur was barely in and the dwarf was a non-factor. But then here comes Arn out and gives the 4-finger horseman sign and the kind of a thumbs up at a boy. And at a boy, the top babyface's trainer comes out and gives approval to the heels for cheating to win and beat the babyfaces. I don't understand. What'd you think?
It was okay. It was nice to see Tully in there. I mean, he's 67 or whatever, so it's, he's old. With JJ, it's nice to see JJ, but like you said, it's just all of a sudden, and JJ's here. And he just walks out. Like, they have no idea how to use anyone who's a legend in wrestling. Never. It's always stupidity.
Yes, they do. Buy them a plane ticket, ask them if they'll come down and walk to the ring. That's how they use every legend.
When the cameraman started interfering and the announcers didn't know what to say, oh, there was someone doing that. Well, what's the cameraman doing? They were all playing stupid. Excalibur, of course, being the leader, playing stupid there.
Yeah. He's so good at it, though.
When it was Sean Spears, what a letdown. I'm thinking, who could this be? Who's going to be aligned with FTR and Tully? It's been so long since we've seen Sean Spears that I've forgotten about him. And that's a good thing because he was meaningless in AEW. And now Sean Spears is back, which is something that no one wanted. AEW is yet to cut any talent, other than talent that was accused of sexual crimes like Jimmy Havoc. They have not cut any talent. They just keep adding on to this roster. They need to start cutting guys, and Sean Spears should probably be near the top of that list.
Oh, what a list. Oh, what a list. Every wrestler that should get the axe. Oh, all right. Next, one of my favorite segments, actually, because it kind of actually accomplished what it should. Tony Schiavone introduced the Big Show, or the large exhibition, or the gigantic presentation, or the colossal event, or just plain old Paul White. They picked Paul White. Like I said before, Show's funny. He's witty. He can talk. He's a major personality. Every wrestling fan or anybody predisposed to watch a wrestling program probably knows who he is. He was quick. And he comes out, he gets himself over, he buddies up with old Tony, and he makes the big announcement there's going to be a Hall of Fame level talent that will be introduced on the pay-per-view, and built a little tension and showed some personality, or anticipation, I should say. I don't know whether he's going to be a good announcer as far as the actual art of announcing wrestling, because he hasn't ever done it before, but just it'll be a step up if there's just an interesting personality next to one of their legendary announcers who has to sit here and fucking watch all this tomfoolery. So this segment, you got a name. He doesn't mind being on television. He knows how to talk, and he teased the people to buy the pay-per-view to find out who this big name is. Who's the big name going to be, Brian?
I don't know. Who do you think? It's not going to be Punk, I don't think.
No, he's already flat out said, fuck, no, it ain't me.
Who else is Hall of Fame caliber that's out there? I mean,
well,
do you think Brock Lesnar?
In their description, who is...
Do you think Brock Lesnar?
No.
Kurt Angle?
Let me put this. Brock is all about the money, but I don't think that he needs money bad enough to put up with many of the people that he would have to be involved with here in this company. I don't know.
Kurt Angle, maybe a Japanese wrestler. I really don't know. Again, I'll go back to what I said last week. A million different ways you could have debuted the Big Show, Paul White, and had it mean something, instead of just announcing it on Twitter, and then a week later he just comes out to say that he's going to announce another Hall of Fame caliber wrestler that'll be there. This was such a waste. Who the wrestler is going to be? I mean, they've built it up that if it's not someone truly special, it'll be a major letdown.
Well, of course. And it'll be truly special, probably, to the 750,000 people who watch things like this.
Well, I think it was closer to 960 or something this week.
Okay, well, now don't bump them up. I think it was 930, but that's why I still want the overall totals. Let's see. I attribute 100 to 125,000 of those to Shaq. And since now he's been teleported to another dimension, they won't be back.
So you don't think there's any chance Brock Lesnar would be the Hall of Fame caliber wrestler?
I would be seriously surprised.
Brock Lesnar, wanting to get more money out of Vince, opens negotiations with Tony. Tony tells him, yeah, listen, we'll give you a great deal on merch. You'll work X amount of dates a year. We'll pay you more than Vince. And Brock says, you know what? I love money. It's going to be a lot of money.
Two things. Number one, I can see the first part of that happening. Brock Lesnar opens up negotiations with Tony Khan. Brock Lesnar also knows if he ever, at this stage of his life, if he was to actually go show up and work for AEW, he would never negotiate with Vince McMahon again. Because it's not like he's got another 5 or 10 years that Vince can get over being fucking pissed.
Vince may not have another 5 or 10 years.
Well, but at the same time, you think Stephanie ain't going to hold Vince to some of Vince's grudges? But the point is, he would definitely play both sides against each other, but in the end, he would not take the step unless he never wanted to deal with Vince McMahon again, and then he would have to come down and take this fucking guy's money by getting in the ring with and stooging for a variety of these goofs that they would have him do. Brock does not have a good sense of humor, and he doesn't have that much respect for the wrestling business, but he doesn't want to go out and do stupid shit in public just on his own, whether it was good wrestling shit or bad wrestling shit. If it's stupid, he don't want to fucking do it. So I cannot see him in need of money enough to go down and play with these kids. But we'll see.
You have any guesses?
I'm going to guess they're over 45. How about that?
Okay.
This is not going to be a major in-ring game changer. This is going to be another fucking legendary figure they're going to have to try to figure out a fucking job for.
Mick Foley?
How about that? Well, you never know. I might not be surprised there. Anyway, they followed up the big show or the large exhibition or the gigantic event or the colossal blah, blah, blah with more footage of outlaw mud show girl wrestling in Japan. And followed that up with the finals of this hokey bullshit women's tournament that they have foisted off on us. Nyla Rose, Vicky Guerrero's back. Was she missing last week?
She was. That may have been because of the weather issues in Texas.
Nyla Rose with Vicky Guerrero against Rio de Janeiro.
I know it's a different spelling, but when you listen to the commentary and they keep saying, oh, Rio, I don't know. Vince goes overboard when no one could have the same name. But we have a girl on the roster named Riho, and then this
two Japanese girls named Rio. Yeah. It's not like having a fucking white guy from Cleveland named Steve and a black guy from fucking California named Steve. You got two Japanese girls named Rio. And Rio Kanamaka, I don't know what the fuck her name was, and here's what I wrote. I can call this. Nyla Rose does a job for another one of Harpo Fingerfuck's fetishes after 15 to 20 minutes of every move ever done but not sold. And so I wrote down the minute that the entrances started, and then I fast-forwarded it, and 17 minutes total later, Nyla Rose jobs to one of the shittiest leg drops and mostly missed that I've ever seen. And then the other Japanese girl champion came out and gave Rio de Janeiro the trophy, and they traded forearms, and the girl champion, what's her name, Hikaru Shida?
Shida.
She knocked old Rio on her ass, and they went to break. The fuck was this all about? Did you watch this match?
A little
you
bit.
Hate yourself.
I remember
even on drugs, you watched this match.
I remember the post-match a little more than the match. I was kind of in and out at this point. Like I said, they top-loaded the show. All the stuff and all the wrestlers and the personalities you would kind of want to see were at the front of the show. And then the rest of the show...
Even if you like Japanese girl wrestlers, not as much as Twinkle Toes' fantasies and fetishes, but do you want to see almost 20 minutes of a girl that you've never seen on television before against a girl that has done a job for every single female, even though she's 3 times the size of every other girl, Nyla Rose? She's been beaten by every single female on the roster, and now she's wrestling a Japanese girl with an unpronounceable name that we've never seen before. So there you go. National TV. Tony Schiavone came out with Sting, and this time he actually asked a question, and Sting answered it. I was so shocked. Usually Tony asks a question, puts the microphone in front of the interview subject, and somebody's music plays. But this time Sting actually spoke. Not only that, but did you notice that it's been so long since Sting was actually in a wrestling company where people interviewed him, that when Tony asked him the question and put the microphone in front of him, Sting took the microphone and just started talking. And Tony left his hand up for a minute and then just wandered off out of the picture. They don't even know how to work with an interviewer now. As a matter of fact, that's something that was a rule that I instituted at various points in OVW and in Ring of Honor. The talent does not take the microphone away from the announcer. The announcer doesn't know how to work the fucking microphone so the talent can be heard on their promos. We'll get another announcer. And if you got 2 talents going back and forth in a fucking interview, either the one announcer works it or elsewise, maybe we'll get another announcer in there to work another microphone. But when the guy just takes the microphone from the announcer and just takes over and starts doing his own shit, then it's just phony sports entertainment wrestling like everywhere else. Anyway, so Sting did actually speak, and then Ricky Starks interrupted. And this was the promo of the night. Ricky Starks comes out. He's got fire. He's got cadence. He's got emotion. The guy can talk. Sounded like he meant it. He was trying to be serious. And then he slaps Sting. Sting gets on him, beats him up, rips half his clothes off, gets a scorpion deathlock on him. Hook and Powerhouse Hobbs come out, but Hobbs is, instead of getting in the ring, Powerhouse Hobbs, 275 pounds, 6 foot whatever, beast, he's reaching in to pull Starks out like a sack of shit. Hook gets in on top of Sting from behind and grabs him, and Hook just Sting reaches up and wallops Hook, and he takes a bump off. So Sting gets back to his feet. Cage is in by this time. Cage just gloms Sting and sets him up for a powerbomb. But Darby Allin's music starts playing. So Brian Cage just lets go of Sting and goes, "Oh, somebody's coming." And guess who? It's Darby Allin, the guy whose music was playing, and he jumps on Cage's back. And together, Sting and Darby Allin beat up Cage. 5 heels run off again. Didn't they just beat the fucking shit out of the heels last week?
Yes, that's when Darby came in on the zip line.
Yes. And then they just beat the shit out of the heels again. They're still going to have this street fight match on pay-per-view. Why? Why have it? They got one move on Sting. They powerbomb Sting. which they could have made a big deal out of. Everybody knows he got a bad neck. They could have fucking taken him out in the ambulance, not have him disappear, whatever. Then there could be a reason for this street fight, where this time we're going to finish him off. Sting's, he's over the hill, he's past it. He's got a bad neck. We're going to finish him. We're going to retire him right on pay-per-view. And Sting doing the, I got to come back for my dignity type of thing. And Darby Allin with me. And then they have a fucking match, and the fucking baby faces kick the heel's ass when the people have paid to see it. You blithering simpletons. The only way they could make this any worse is if then they have the fucking street fight and the heels win on pay-per-view. That's the only way they could make the psychology of this entire thing any worse. The baby faces have beaten the heels up and run them off and emasculated them at every turn in this whole fucking deal, except when they powerbomb Sting, which then their personnel from the company got on the internet and said he's okay, he was fine, and it was his idea to take it. And then 2 weeks in a row, the baby faces come back, and a 60-year-old man with a bad neck and a fucking 150-pound skateboarder beat up 5 grown men with very little effort. And we are now expected to pay to see a street fight between them. When I feel so sorry for Team Taz, I want to donate money for them instead of fucking throw shit at them and boo them. I have sympathy for the heels. They've been mistreated like this. It's the goddamn most insane bunch of shit I've ever seen in my life. It helped me in any way understand this.
I can't help you understand it. The booking of this feud, the booking of every AEW feud is poor. The question is whether people want to see the match. And that's really the story most of the time. There are AEW fans who can't wait for the match, and they excuse the fact that the week-to-week booking to get there is atrocious. This feud, this program between Team Taz and Sting and Darby has been stupid from the get-go. And again, like you said, and like I said earlier with the Bucks, the babyfaces, now for the second week in a row, got their revenge on the heels.
Anyway.
Booker of the Year.
That was followed by an all-star singles match with 10 of the Dork Order, the guy with a mask on and Roman numerals for 10 written across his chest. Actually, not even Roman numerals, just tally marks. Against Max Caster, the wannabe rap star. And 2 things about this. Scorpio Sky was on color. Welcome back, Scorpio, from the Federal Witness Protection Program. But also, the Dork Order, instead of being the healed cult disciple group, is now the comedy mid-card fun-loving babyface group. And they also came out with Brody Lee's son and the mask and the whole thing. And I'm not going to watch this if they're going to continue to put this kid in this position. It's fucking ridiculous all the way around, and it's not professional. And so I just skipped ahead. I don't want to have anything to say about it. But if they're not going to actually be serious, there's no reason for me to watch and knock what they do with this poor kid. So moving on. The main event. Matt Hardy and Mark Quinn this time, although Tony did slip and call him Isaiah Cassidy because they wear the same fucking outfit. You never see both of them in the same place anymore, even though they're a tag team. Against Long John Silver from the Dork Order and Adam Page. This is the main event. 2 teams of reluctant partners. A team where Matt Hardy is the manager and he's fucking his guys that used to be baby faces, but now they're kind of heels, but you don't see them in tag team matches anymore because the story with Big Money Matt's more important, so he teams with one or the other. Going against, as I mentioned, formerly a heel, now a goofy cult favorite underneath comedy guy, and their poor beleaguered superstar Adam Page, who should be so over by now and has been mired down in all of this dreck since this program went on the air. And both teams, as I said, reluctant partners. They don't really want to team with each other, and they do a lot of the tagging each other in and out like without the other's affirmation or knowledge like we've seen already in this program. And this was a tag team match on any indie show. I'm not talking about the flips and the gymnastics or garbage wrestling. I'm just talking about basic indie wrestling that has no TV or angles going on, just four guys in the ring doing shit. And then a incredibly iceberg cold tag to Page so that he could make his great comeback. But why they just fucking frostbit his fucking hand with this cold tag, I don't have any idea. He made his own excitement. But this match didn't build at all. It stopped and started. And the guys just, as I said, kept tagging themselves in and out against their partner's wishes. And then it got contrived in a way too busy finish somehow where Page and Silver gave Mark Quinn about 18 bumps in a row and then beat him. Flatter than 4 o'clock. And then Hardy attacked Page and beat up Page. But then here comes the Dork Order to jump on Matt Hardy. And then all the tag teams suddenly appear that are in another one of these goddamn overdone, sloppy, scrambled egg battle royals that Tony Khan is so in love with. I mean, my God, get a butt plug, Tony, to comfort you. Instead of having these goddamn battle royals that just are a tag team battle royals, even worse. So every tag team in the known wrestling world jumped into the ring and they were all fighting off on the air. Mark booking. That's what we'll do. And we dropped the cow, ladies and gentlemen. We dropped the cow. What do you follow this with? 26 guys in the ring fighting for no reason. We don't know who half of them are on site. Did I miss anything?
No, by this point, I was done. Between the painkillers and the decline in star power on this show in the second hour, and like you said, no disrespect. I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, but I really feel uncomfortable seeing Brody Lee Jr. out there shirtless and shoeless. It makes me uncomfortable. I know you want to do nice things for the kid, but this isn't it.
As I mentioned, many of my father's friends did nice things for me and my mother, but I didn't go to any of the Courier Journal's fucking editorial meetings after the fact. So there's just that. And as you said, the star power, this started out as a literal who's who of wrestling, and it ended up as a literal who's that of wrestling. But that was another week for our friends that abduct everyone wrestling. Now, once again, I'm going to raise the offer I made earlier in the program. $7. $7 for information leading to the reappearance of the discovery.
He was found.
Shaquille O'Neal.
They found him.
Where?
He was on the basketball show on TNT. He's all right.
That could have been pre-taped.
No.
I think he's still out there somewhere. I think he's still missing. I think they just don't want to let people know that they've lost Shaq. They can't find Shaq. They're trying to fucking kill some time. Like somebody calls for Shaq, they answer the phone, they say, no, he's in the shower. I'll have him call you back. And then they call back later on. No, he got out of the shower, but he went down to 7-Eleven to get some cola. I'll have him call you back. They can't find Shaq. They don't want to admit it. I think there's going to be a big scandal about this.
Well, that was another stellar week of... Did you see they have banners now saying Best Weekly TV Show 2019-2020?
Can you imagine if all the great promoters in years past had put up banners on their TV show when they won the Wrestling Observer Television Show of the Year award? You know, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling missed a chance. Instead of having all those banners, you know, United States and Canada and Mexico and Australia, New Zealand, Japan, all the places where the NWA had members, they could have, in like 1988, they could have just put up a banner that said 4-time Wrestling Observer Television Show of the Year award. Imagine that. Anyway, I get that's a good place to end the program this week. Now that we've got rid of the foolishness, let's talk about something serious for a second. Jimmy Crockett passed away this past just a few days ago as we record this. And we had done, was it last week on The Experience or was it this past week on the drive-thru?
It was the drive-thru on Tuesday.
Because we had just heard that he was sick and in the hospital and in bad shape. And so that's last week's drive-thru that came out on March the 2nd, or elsewise the clip is on YouTube, but it's a considerably lengthy discussion of Jimmy Crockett and some of my experiences working there at the time and the Carolina Territory and just the history of the Carolina Territory. But, it's kind of funny and ironic in a way that the wrestling war of the 80s that was really, I'm so over the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars. I didn't like the product in a lot of cases on either side. And even though I was on one side, I was at one point ambivalent about which one won. But the real wrestling war that shaped what we're still looking at today as modern wrestling was the one in the 80s with Jim Crockett Jr. and Vince McMahon Jr. Their fathers had both started in promotion in the 30s, and it came down to two second-generation promoters, two Southerners, but one that wanted to be a Northerner, one that was proud to be a Southerner. It was almost like, goddamn, it's a fucking trivia fact. In the Civil War, both of the presidents of the United States and the Confederate States were born in the state of Kentucky. And both of the promoters in the two-horse promotional race in the 80s were born in the state of North Carolina. But Vince had an unhappy childhood and could never get past that and had a grudge against the South since that time. And Jim Crockett Jr. came up in a well-to-do family with probably the relationship that Vince wishes he had with his wrestling promoter father, and loved and was proud of being from the South and would never have gone anywhere else and just wanted to promote wrestling, like we said, in the Carolinas. And I think that's another one of the ironic parts that, maybe it was personal with Vince and Jimmy Jr. because Vince could see some of himself and what he might have done or what he could have done or been or whatever in Jimmy. Would Vince, if Vince had a better relationship with his father, would he have wanted to conquer the world? Or would he have just been like Jim Crockett and happy to be a family business and well respected in his area and successful enough for people that didn't want to own the world? I don't know, but it's anyway, this is, who's left? Bill Watts, Jerry Jarrett of the great territory promoters. Who else? I'm trying to think. Vern's gone, Fritz is gone, Graham's gone.
Yeah.
It's light.
Antonio Inoki.
Well, the territories in the United States.
I'm just thinking promoters from that period of time.
Era. Yeah, Baba's gone.
Emile Dupree? Is he?
But anyway, I said this on Twitter. I said it last week on a program. I'll say it again. If Jim Crockett Promotions was still in business, I don't know that I would have ever left Charlotte. I loved working for that company, not only because the talent was great and the wrestling was outstanding and the territory, the people loved wrestling there, and I loved living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Since I've been back in recent years, it's gotten big. It looks like a big northern city now, but when I lived there, it was green and it was southern and the weather was mostly good and people were friendly and great places to eat. But the wrestling promotion there, you were a local superstar. You were more over than the local television news celebrities, or there was, as we've mentioned, no professional sports back then in the Carolinas except for auto racing. But, even though the heels had heat and there were certain places you didn't want to be in public because of that heat, they respected the wrestlers in that territory too. They hated the heels and still respected them, if that makes any sense. But it wasn't like looked down on like a substandard form of entertainment. Or, the wrestlers were stars and wrestling was big, and that was because of Crockett Promotions and the way they took care of their business all those years. And to exist in anything as a business for 55 years with only 3 people running it, Jim Crockett Sr., John Ringley for a couple of years, Francis's husband, the son-in-law, and then Jim Jr., 3 people running a company in 55 years ain't bad. And the records they set and the attendances they had. So Jimmy Crockett did turn out to be, now that all things are considered, probably the second most successful wrestling promoter of the 20th century behind Vince McMahon Jr. So,
is there something to be said there for someone who had wrestling people? He was a wrestling promoter, but he wasn't really coming up with the angles and he was hands off in a lot of ways.
The only time that Jimmy Crockett was ever a booker in his life was that 6-week period between the time they fired Dusty and the time they brought George Scott in when TBS had bought the company. And he came to us, and at the time he said, I'm not a booker. He said, I've been given this spot. I'm going to do maintenance. A maintenance show in those days, you would know, a maintenance show would just keep everything going. Don't start anything and don't really cut anything off. Just keep it going. And, of course, he violated his own rule when he booked that match for Randy Rose to leave town. But he knew he wasn't a booker. He had bookers and he had wrestling experts his whole run in running the company. Whether he inherited George Scott when he first took over the company, and then there was a period of time there where they tried the deal where they had a couple of different bookers because they had even though it wasn't a big geographical territory, as we mentioned, North and South Carolina and Virginia, they would have up to 3 live events per night running. So for a period of time there, Ernie Ladd, I think, was booking part of the territory, and Wahoo was helping out, and Dory Funk Jr.
Dory Funk Jr., 83, yeah.
83 was actually the booker, the nominal booker when they did Starrcade, but that was an idea that had been fed to him by Dusty. And then he brought Dusty in, and Dusty, of course, brought JJ to be his assistant. But Crockett ran a great territorial business. We said all the reasons why that he couldn't keep up business-wise with Vince on the other show the other day, but it was a perfect setup for a territorial wrestling promotion. If business went down, his overhead was low at the start. Like I said, the 3 secretaries and Sandy Scott and the accountant and Gene Anderson being full-time employees, and then other guys, local promoters in different places. But if business got lean, overhead was low. He could still keep talent, keep running his shows. If business flourished, then everybody made money. It was the highest paying NWA territory. Really, if you were on top in Charlotte, the only place you were going to make more money just working one territory was working for Vince. And those towns ran like clockwork. The TV shows, they were always on top of them. They had great relations with the TV stations. So it was a model territory promotion that grossed, as I mentioned, and this is lawsuit material, so this was under oath, $21 million in 1986 out of a converted convenience store. And that was not the only good year they had. They had every year in the 70s was steady. The guys on top in the 70s and early 80s were making $150,000 a year apiece or more. And like I mentioned, when I was there, me and the Midnight made close to $200,000 apiece in 1986. And I know Flair made 2.5 times that. And Dusty probably as much or more between wrestling and booking. So, that's the thing. And that's, if all of this other shit hadn't happened, we even mentioned on the show that even with Vince's national expansion and all the other territories going under, if Crockett had minded their own business and not have been talked into chasing Vince National and not bought all the other territories, Florida, Kansas City, maybe UWF, but then maybe not. At least they got some talent and good TV slots out of the deal, but still, it would have been through most of the decade of the 90s that they could have still stayed in business in the Carolinas. Vince didn't draw one crowd anywhere in the Carolinas territory until 1998. He barely ran live events in that territory and didn't draw any crowds of sizable nature until the middle of the Monday Night Wars. And it had been 10 years since Crockett, had sold. So it had to be a turnover of a complete generation who remembered. Let's face it, the folks in the Carolinas from the 60s on saw the absolute best in-ring talent on a regular basis, the best matches, the top television production of the time. They were used to the best, and they didn't want that, cartoon New York wrestling. That's what all Southern people thought of it, but especially the standard that had been set in the Carolinas, they didn't want the cartoon wrestling. That's why it took an entire new generation to come up and be caught up in Stone Cold and The Rock and all those other guys before they could sell tickets on a regular basis, on a large basis in the Carolinas. And that's not just opinion. And that's not just me saying, oh, our wrestling was better because I was there. It's fact. They would come to, on that first 80s expansion, remember they came haltingly into the Carolinas and Virginia. Ric Flair cussed the fucking Virginia Athletic Commission guy out one night in Richmond because he was letting the WWF come into the state and run against Crockett, who'd been there for 30 years and supported all those athletic commissions. So, it's not hyperbole to say that people just rejected the different style. It was the same thing when Vince had bought the Atlanta TV, and it's been documented that people were calling in the station, we want our Gordon Soley wrestling. What the fuck is this? We don't understand this. This is not what we want. And I think Vince took it personally, and that's what gave a little more juice to the war between him and Crockett, was that he was hearing from a lot of people. The Southern people want their Southern wrestling. They don't like this shit. And Vince did not like hearing that his wrestling was not the best in the world in every way. But anyway, it's a tribute to Crockett Sr. and to Jimmy for that last 15 years where he did take the company bigger than it had ever been before. But that they put something together like that so many people still look fondly on. And the Carolinas, the people that grew up there, the reunions always do better. Independent wrestling with the stars from those days always does better. I was on some of those big-time wrestling shows a couple years ago in the Carolinas, just the Rock and Roll Express, me, Baby Doll, whoever. The people go insane because it was their childhoods on a widespread basis. Probably second in the United States only to the city of Memphis itself as to where wrestling was more popular per capita in an area than any place else in the country. And look at what we just saw on All Friends Wrestling. Who are the legends? There was Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson on, national television in 2021 based on what they did working for Jimmy Crockett that impressed everybody, including the billionaire Money Mark 30 years ago. So I've said this also before. Dusty would have got restless or wanted to go to Florida or wanted to do something at some point, or some change would have been made. And because I was the youngest one there and I was willing to fucking, walk through hell with gasoline britches on, if Crockett had lasted into the 90s, I would have ended up booking that promotion sooner or later. And I would have loved that because those buildings and those towns and those people, it was wrestling fucking heaven. And I can't see, with all those things not having changed, and if TBS hadn't bought the company and sports entertainment become a thing and all the 90s gone to shit and the territories died, I can't imagine, unless they just fired me, I would have never left Jim Crockett Promotions. And I can't imagine them firing me because that's probably the one company that until TBS got involved, I never had a single crossword with any of those people. Because we were making a fortune. It was the best wrestling show on the planet, and I was happy to be there. There was no reason to complain or yell at anybody. Anyway, we send our sympathies out to David and Francis and all of Jimmy's family and friends, and of course, and Jackie. Jackie was always my favorite Crockett. I just saw him last year when we went to Charlotte for the NWA pay-per-view. They were there then, by the way, as a matter of fact. Between wrestling and the minor league hockey team and the minor league baseball team and the Harlem Globetrotter shows, almost every traveling show for 40 years was promoted in that area by the Crockett's. So people still remember them that never saw a wrestling match. Anyway, I don't know what else to say. Should I just wind it up?
I think we wind it up. Just remind everyone, this week's drive-thru will have a review of AEW Revolution.
Oh, joy, oh, bliss. We'll find out who that Hall of Fame-worthy talent is. Maybe it's Sean Spears' twin sister, Brittany. Who knows? But anyway, until then, yes, so this coming week, drive-thru is the AEW Revolution pay-per-view and questions from the audience. Next week, the experience will be back. Don't forget, tomorrow, Sunday, March 7th, is Cameo Day at noon Eastern. More news, hopefully, next week on the action figures. And don't forget, we're almost at 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. What do we got, 193 or whatever it is, 4?
Yep.
Some people need to start subscribing twice just to get us to an even number so I can relax. My nerves are shot. Anyway, official Jim Cornette on YouTube. Do what you can, folks. Get us to an even number. And until then, for Brian and his missing teeth and the missing Shaquille O'Neal, if anybody does find Shaq, please tell him to call home. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye, everybody.